A hushed journey through the annals of ancient myth and the quiet corners of forgotten history awaits. It is a moment to dim the ambient light, to draw comfort from a soft blanket, and to allow the clamor of the day to recede into a distant echo. These are narratives that have been woven into the fabric of human understanding for millennia, passed down through the ages like precious, whispered confidences. Tonight, these timeless sagas will be unveiled not with overt theatrics or frenzied excitement, but with the measured cadence of a storyteller sharing tales by the flickering glow of a single candle. Each account will unfurl deliberately, akin to observing the tranquil drift of clouds across a vast evening sky, leading one to wonder what profound revelation might slowly emerge. Story 1. The Cataclysm of Pandora's Box, Humanity's 5-Minute Downfall. Eons before the existence of one's distant ancestors, in an era preceding the naming of cities and the very invention of the wheel, humanity experienced a life of profound simplicity. Existence was governed by the rhythms of nature, awakening with the dawn, sustenance sought when hunger called, and slumber embraced with the descent of night. There was no concept of future anxiety, for each coming day inherently provided for itself, a harmonious cycle unbroken by worry. From their resplendent celestial palace high atop Mount Olympus, the Olympian deities observed these early mortals, and truth be told, a profound sense of ennui had settled upon them. One might imagine the tedium of possessing omnipotent power over the universe, yet finding little of genuine interest to occupy such boundless capability. Zeus, the revered sovereign of the gods, often found himself enthroned, his fingers drumming idly, his gaze sweeping across the predictably tranquil world below. The lives of humans, in their unblemished innocence, offered scant deviation or surprise. One might intuitively surmise that such an existence of peace and predictability would be universally cherished, and indeed, for mortals, it represented an Edenic state. However, the divine beings harbored a decidedly different palate for entertainment. They yearned for dramatic conflicts, for intricate complications, for the spectacle of mortals grappling with adversity and striving to decipher the labyrinthine challenges of existence. Their amusement was akin to a detached observer deriving pleasure from watching a colony of ants navigate around unexpected obstacles in their path, utterly oblivious to the profound implications of their own manipulations. On one particularly uneventful afternoon, Zeus engaged in a conversation with his half-brother, Hephaestus, the formidable god of fire, metalwork, and craftsmanship. Hephaestus, perpetually cloaked in the dark residue of his forge, was ceaselessly engaged in tinkering, perpetually in the throes of creation, his hands always shaping some new marvel. "An idea has just sparked within me," Zeus declared, his tone carrying the subtle inflection of someone convinced of their own cleverness, yet perhaps unwittingly harboring a notion fraught with unforeseen consequences. "What manner of concept has captured your divine imagination?" Hephaestus inquired, his attention unwavering from the delicate golden bracelet he meticulously hammered into its exquisite form. "I desire for you to fashion a woman for me," Zeus commanded, a hint of mischievous intent perhaps playing on his lips. Hephaestus momentarily suspended his rhythmic hammering. "A woman? Are you referring to a mortal female? A human woman?" he asked, his brow furrowing slightly at the unusual request. "Precisely, a human woman. Yet she must not be merely any woman. Construct her flawlessly." endow her with unparalleled beauty, instill within her an insatiable curiosity, make her so utterly captivating that no being, mortal or immortal, could possibly resist her allure and her enigmatic charm. And so Hephaestus, with his immense calloused hands, commenced his monumental task. He meticulously shaped the pliable clay, working with a deliberate and unhurried precision. He sculpted delicate fingers, elegant shoulders, and a visage that simultaneously conveyed profound kindness and an intriguing air of mystery. Upon completion, he stepped back, surveying his silent creation resting upon his sturdy workbench, a masterpiece awaiting its final spark. "She requires the breath of life," Hephaestus mused, a note of anticipation in his voice. Zeus, with a divine exhalation, imbued the clay figure with vitality, and in that instant, her eyes fluttered open. They were dark, luminous, and remarkably intelligent, brimming with nascent questions about the unfamiliar world surrounding her. Slowly she pushed herself upright, her gaze sweeping across Hephaestus's bustling workshop with an expression of pure wonder. Every detail was novel to her: the array of tools suspended upon the walls, the fiery glow emanating from the forge, the comforting warmth radiating from the hearth. "What is my designation?" she inquired, her voice a soft, melodic sound, the first words ever uttered by this new creation. "Pandora," Zeus pronounced, his voice resonating with authority. "Your name shall be Pandora." Soon, the other Olympian gods descended to greet her, and each bestowed upon her a magnificent gift. Aphrodite, the goddess of love, graced her with a beauty so radiant that even the blossoming flowers would instinctively turn their petals towards her as she passed. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, endowed her with extraordinary skill in her hands, enabling her to weave intricate tapestries, prepare exquisite meals, and create wonders with effortless grace. Hermes, the swift messenger of the gods, gifted her with an insatiable curiosity, a trait that would prove to be, perhaps, the most perilously potent of all. Apollo, the god of music and light, bestowed upon her a voice so enchanting that it could coax birds from the highest branches of the trees. But then, Zeus himself presented his own most enigmatic gift, a box. It was fashioned from dark, lustrous wood, polished to a silky smoothness, and adorned with elaborate, intricate carvings along its edges. Its dimensions were modest, perhaps the size of a refined jewelry casket one might place upon a dresser. Yet, its most striking feature was its lock, a heavy, ornately designed mechanism that bore the distinct appearance of having never, ever been opened. "This artifact is for you alone," Zeus declared, extending the box towards her. "However, you are absolutely forbidden under any circumstances to ever open it. Is this command unequivocally clear?" Pandora cradled the box with an almost reverent care. It possessed a surprising heft, heavier than its appearance suggested, and felt curiously warm to her touch. What profound secrets lie concealed within its depths, she ventured to ask, her inherent curiosity already stirring. "That," Zeus replied, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing upon his lips, a smile that held a chilling undercurrent of cunning rather than genuine kindness, "is precisely the knowledge you are destined never to acquire. It is a universal truth that a prohibition can often ignite the very desire it seeks to suppress." Pandora, now burdened with this forbidden object, felt its presence grow increasingly heavy in her hands, not from any physical alteration in its mass, but from the escalating weight of her burgeoning thoughts and conjectures. What immense significance could necessitate such stringent concealment? What potential peril could be so great as to warrant apprehension even among the omnipotent gods themselves? Zeus, having set his elaborate plan in motion, dispatched Pandora to Earth, to the serene world where humans continued their uncomplicated existence. She arrived in a small, unassuming village where dwellings were crafted from sturdy stone and natural wood, where inhabitants cultivated their own sustenance and knew every neighbor by name. The villagers, with the innate hospitality often found in close-knit communities, extended a warm and genuine welcome to the enigmatic newcomer. Pandora seamlessly integrated into this newfound life. She mastered the art of baking bread, her loaves emerging from the oven consistently golden and perfectly risen. She learned to weave, and her fabrics, imbued with an almost divine touch, were stronger and more exquisitely beautiful than any previously seen. She effortlessly forged friendships, and people frequently sought her out, drawn by her perceptive counsel and her compassionate words. Yet, through all her endeavors and her flourishing integration, the box remained. She carefully placed it upon a prominent shelf within her modest abode, ensuring it was within her line of sight each passing day. Initially, her glances were infrequent, mere fleeting acknowledgments. But as the weeks slowly unfurled, she found her gaze lingering upon it with increasing frequency. She would halt her intricate weaving, her shuttle poised in mid-air, to stare at its polished surface. She would awaken in the quiet hours of the night, her mind consumed by its mystery. The box, it seemed, exerted an almost magnetic pull, not through audible words, but through an alluring whisper of boundless possibility. What if it contained something truly magnificent? What if it held the answers to profound questions she had not even consciously formulated? Could it be that Zeus had merely prohibited its opening because its contents were far too wondrous for the comprehension of ordinary mortals? One languid afternoon, as the other villagers indulged in their customary midday repose, Pandora found herself seated within her home, her eyes fixed upon the box. A shaft of sunlight, streaming through her window, illuminated the dark wood in such a way that the intricate carved designs seemed to subtly shift and undulate. Tentatively, she reached out, her fingertips gently brushing against the heavy lock. It felt surprisingly warm. She then carefully lifted the box, holding it close to her ear. Was that a faint whispering? A sound so ephemeral, like distant voices conversing from an immeasurable remove. She could not discern individual words, yet an undeniable sensation of something alive, something yearning to be heard, emanated from within the sealed container. Just a fleeting glimpse, she murmured to herself, her voice barely a breath, merely to ascertain its contents. Then I shall promptly reseal it. The rationalization, a seductive whisper of self-deception, had taken root. She scrutinized the lock with heightened intensity. It was indeed a marvel of intricate craftsmanship and aesthetic beauty, yet it no longer appeared utterly impenetrable. In fact, it seemed to beckon, to silently implore, as if patiently awaiting the precise moment for someone to finally insert a key and turn its mechanism. But a key, she realized with a jolt, was precisely what she lacked. Driven by a desperate impulse, Pandora scoured her house, meticulously searching through drawers, rummaging through various containers, and peering into forgotten corners. At last, nestled within a small, unassuming pouch that had accompanied her from the lofty heights of Olympus, she discovered it, a tiny golden key. It was exquisitely small and delicately fashioned, bearing the identical intricate patterns that adorned the lock itself. Her heart began to pound with a fervent rhythm as she carefully inserted the key into the weighting mechanism. It slid in perfectly, as though it had been forged for this singular, fated moment. With a hand that trembled almost imperceptibly, she turned it slowly, and a soft, resonant click echoed in the quiet room. The lock yielded. For a suspended moment, Pandora simply gazed at the now unlocked box. This was it. This was the culmination of every lingering thought, every burgeoning temptation, every silent query that had consumed her since the very day she had received this enigmatic gift. With a breath held captive, she lifted the lid just a fraction, creating a minuscule crack, just enough to steal a forbidden peek inside. What was unleashed in the subsequent 5 minutes would irrevocably alter the course of human existence forever. The instant the lid parted, a torrent of entities began to surge forth from the box. These were not tangible objects, but rather abstract concepts, potent emotions, and profound experiences utterly unknown to humanity until that very moment. First emerged worry, a shadowy, twisted specter that immediately began to insidiously whisper anxieties about every conceivable misfortune. Then came disease, extending invisible, insidious tendrils that would soon cause mortals to cough, to ache, and to feel their strength drain away. Jealousy slithered forth next, a verdant, venomous force, swiftly followed by hatred, a crimson, furious entity. Fear came tumbling out, bringing with it the torment of nightmares and the gnawing grip of anxiety. Pain, both physical and the far more insidious emotional anguish, materialized, cruelly instructing humans that their bodies and hearts possessed a capacity for suffering far beyond any minor stubbed toe or superficial cut they had ever known. Pandora, her face contorted in dawning horror, desperately attempted to force the lid shut, but it was already too late. The box's cover seemed to have acquired a malevolent life of its own. Each time she pushed it down with all her might, it sprang back open with an unyielding resilience. A relentless cascade of further troubles poured forth: insatiable greed, corrosive envy, profound sorrow, paralyzing despair, ravaging famine, brutal war, the inexorable march of old age, and finally, the ultimate cessation of life itself, death. Each of these newly unleashed afflictions radiated outwards from Pandora's small house, spreading like ever-widening ripples across a once placid pond. The villagers, who had been enjoying their peaceful siestas, began to stir, waking with a profound sense of disquietude and an inexplicable strangeness. They cast their gazes upon their neighbors, and for the very first time, an unsettling flicker of suspicion ignited within them. They looked at their simple, modest homes and felt a novel pang of dissatisfaction. They contemplated their uncomplicated lives, and suddenly, an aching void, a sense that something vital was missing, permeated their beings. Within those fateful 5 minutes, the entire world underwent a complete and irreversible metamorphosis. Humanity was abruptly introduced to the bitter taste of jealousy over another's possessions, the gnawing torment of worrying about an uncertain tomorrow, and the crushing weight of pain that transcended any mere physical injury, reaching deep into the very core of their emotional existence. Finally, when the enigmatic receptacle appeared utterly devoid of its contents, and Pandora sat weeping profoundly, consumed by remorse upon her chamber floor, a faint, unexpected voice emanated from within the box. "Wait," the ethereal sound urged. "Do not secure it just yet. I remain here." Pandora, her eyes widened with a renewed, hesitant curiosity, peered into the box's depths and discerned a luminous, diminutive entity. It was exquisitely formed, adorned with iridescent argent appendages and graced with a gentle, comforting expression. "Who are you?" Pandora inquired, her voice a fragile whisper of surprise and trepidation. "I am Hope," the figure declared, with a serene certainty. "Zeus, in his foresight, placed me within the box as well, but nestled in its deepest recesses. I was destined to emerge as the final entity, a counterbalance to the chaos. And so, Hope ascended gracefully from the confines of the box and diffused into the vast expanse of the world. Lacking the boisterous clamor or tumultuous spectacle of the troubles that had preceded her, she was nonetheless unwavering in her resolve. A pervasive, quiet strength, she gently insinuated into the hearts of people the notion that the morrow might indeed prove more favorable than the present day. She instilled within them the conviction that intricate dilemmas could be unraveled, that profound anguish could eventually dissipate, and that even amidst the most profound gloom, there perpetually existed the possibility of a superior state of being. Pandora eventually succeeded in securing the box, yet by that juncture, its interior was entirely vacant. The myriad troubles had disseminated throughout the global expanse, and humans everywhere were unraveling the profound implications of enduring adversity. Simultaneously, however, they were also discovering what it truly signified to harbor optimism, to endeavor ceaselessly, and to persevere resolutely amidst arduous circumstances. And that, as some philosophical observers contend, is how humanity ascended to its genuine essence, not flawless, not immune to tribulations, but intrinsically capable of confronting challenges with steadfast courage and an indomitable spirit of expectation. As for Pandora herself, she spent her remaining days within that humble village, offering solace and assistance to her fellow villagers as they grappled with the novel realities of their existence. She remained perpetually cognizant of the oppressive mass of that box and the distinct sensation of the key turning in its lock. Nevertheless, she also never forgot the soft, encouraging resonance of optimism, perpetually reminding her that even the most profound errors in judgment could ultimately engender something meaningful. Sometimes, in the quiet hours of the nocturnal expanse, when the accumulated burdens of daily existence grew oppressive, people would recall Pandora's narrative. They would remember that an inquisitive nature, even one fraught with peril, constituted an intrinsic facet of their humanity. And they would remember that no matter how dire circumstances appeared, hope was still there, steadfast in its enduring patience and unwavering tenacity, perpetually anticipating the dawn of a new day. What do you genuinely believe was contained within that enigmatic receptacle? Was its opening predestined for release from the very outset? Or was Pandora's inherent inquisitiveness truly a genuine misstep, a profound error in judgment that irrevocably altered the world forever? Now let us traverse back to an epoch when early humans trembled incessantly against the biting chill and consumed their sustenance in its unadulterated, unheated state. When the sole illumination, once twilight descended, emanated from the celestial bodies of the moon and stars. This narrative recounts the genesis of fire for humanity and elucidates why one deity paid a grievous, agonizing retribution for his act of profound benevolence. Prometheus was distinctly divergent from his divine brethren. While Zeus and his immediate family spent their time on Mount Olympus, engaging in leisurely pursuits and orchestrating grand designs, Prometheus found greater fulfillment in traversing the mortal realm among humans on Earth. He would frequently adopt a mundane persona, disguising himself as an ordinary traveler to visit their small settlements and observe their way of life. What he witnessed filled him with a profound sadness. These humans, though ingenious and benevolent, were simultaneously afflicted by the biting chill and grappling with persistent adversities. When the sun descended below the horizon, they congregated tightly within caves and rudimentary abodes, striving desperately to maintain warmth. They consumed fruits and vegetables raw, and the meat they occasionally managed to procure was fibrous and challenging to process. When an individual succumbed to illness, they lacked the means to sterilize water through heating or to prepare warm, medicinal concoctions. Most significantly, they were gripped by an overwhelming fear of the dark. Without the presence of fire, night transformed into an epoch of profound dread, a time when predatory creatures roamed unhindered and humans could barely discern their own hands in front of their faces. Families would gather close together, exchanging hushed murmurs until the embrace of slumber eventually enveloped them. Prometheus would occasionally join them, partaking in their unheated provisions and absorbing the narratives of their daily struggles. He heard mothers singing mournful lullabies to children who were denied repose by the pervasive chill. He watched fathers attempting to comfort their families when the distant, haunting cries of wolves echoed through the night. He clearly perceived the profound amelioration their existence would undergo if they simply possessed the gift of fire. The gods, of course, possessed fire in abundance. Mount Olympus was perpetually warm and brilliantly luminous, illuminated by perpetual conflagrations that remained eternally unextinguished. The gods could cook sumptuous banquets, imbue their expansive chambers with comforting heat, and extend their creative endeavors through the night on their various projects. Fire was such an intrinsic, fundamental component of their being that they seldom accorded it a moment's consideration. However, Zeus had unequivocally determined that fire exceeded the capacity of mortals to responsibly wield. They are insufficiently developed for such a profound responsibility, he would often declare. Whenever the subject arose, his pronouncement was firm: bestow upon them fire, and they will presume themselves as potent as we are. They will cease their veneration of the divine. They will evolve into a formidable threat. Prometheus, though holding a divergent perspective, exercised extreme caution to avoid overt confrontation with Zeus directly. Instead, he would pose probing inquiries. What if they utilized fire solely for warmth and culinary purposes? What if they pledged to exercise judicious stewardship with it? An unequivocal negation, Zeus would thunder in reply. Humans are inherently inquisitive and prone to imprudence. Grant them fire, and before long, they will be employing it to forge instruments of conflict and unleash mutual annihilation upon each other. No, Prometheus. The sacred flame shall remain solely within the divine dominion. So, Prometheus observed with profound patience and bided his time, and with each subsequent visit to the terrestrial realm, he experienced an intensification of compassionate understanding for the humans. They were cultivating sophisticated communication, aesthetic expression, and harmonious sound. They were mastering agricultural practices and constructing more robust dwellings. They were manifestly endowed with intellect and aptitude. The solitary impediment obstructing their advancement was their lamentable lack of fire. One particular winter proved exceptionally severe and unforgiving. Prometheus assumed the guise of an aged wanderer and traveled to a small village where families were grappling desperately for mere existence. The frigidity reached such an extreme degree that even when swathed in animal skins, people were succumbing to tissue damage from exposure. Children were weeping inconsolably due to starvation, because the unyielding, congealed earth rendered sustenance utterly unobtainable. Prometheus spent 3 days in that village, rendering assistance wherever feasible. He exercised his divine capabilities with understated finesse, guiding foraging groups towards available quarry and alleviating the suffering of ailing inhabitants. Yet, he could not resolve the fundamental dilemma. Without fire, these people were existing in a state of primal deprivation, and some of them were destined to perish before the season's end. On his final night in the village, Prometheus reached a momentous resolution, poised to irrevocably alter the course of destiny. He patiently bided his time until slumber had claimed every villager, then stealthily departed the settlement and ascended once more to the celestial abode of the gods, Mount Olympus. But instead of returning to his own dwelling, he made his way to the grand chamber where the perpetual flame blazed incandescently. The fire was magnificent, a sentient conflagration that undulated and shimmered with vibrant energy, yet remained eternally unextinguished. It was radiating both genial heat and brilliant luminescence, and merely being in its proximity made Prometheus feel the profound solace denied to mortal kind. He surveyed his surroundings to ensure his solitude, then meticulously detached a fragment of the flame. This was a task fraught with immense difficulty. Divine fire was not akin to ordinary combustion. It possessed an inherent sentience and volition, and it resisted any severance from its primordial origin. Prometheus had to employ a uniquely crafted brand, fashioned from the resilient stalk of a fennel plant, which possessed the unique property of holding divine flame without succumbing to combustion. The entire process was a painstaking and exquisitely precise endeavor, akin to attempting to capture a delicate butterfly without inflicting any damage upon its fragile wings. Finally, he held a torch ablaze with the celestial essence of flame. It was of lesser magnitude than the grand conflagration on Mount Olympus, but it was authentic and potent combustion, and it would persist indefinitely, contingent upon a continuous supply of combustible material. Prometheus discreetly ensconced the luminous brand within the folds of his mantle and descended once more to the terrestrial realm. The village was still enveloped in slumber when he arrived. Prometheus proceeded to the center of the settlement and constructed a modest hearth from gathered rocks. He arranged parched timber and combustible tinder within the pit, then applied his radiant brand to the ignitable material. The fire ignited instantaneously, radiating both vivid luminosity and comforting heat. Prometheus sat back and observed it for a moment, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment hitherto unknown to him. This small flame, he knew, would transform their entire existence. They would be warm. They would be able to prepare their provisions. They would be liberated from the pervasive dread of nocturnal obscurity. He left the torch beside the fire pit and vanished without a trace prior to any awakening. The next morning, the villagers were astonished to discover the flickering conflagration. At first, they were hesitant to draw near, but progressively they congregated around it, feeling the genial warmth and gazing in wonder at the undulating inferno. The village elder and sagacious matriarch known as Lyra was the foremost in grasping its profound implications. "This is a divine gift," she declared. "We must nurture it assiduously and ensure its perpetual illumination." The villagers rapidly assimilated the techniques for sustaining the flame and how to kindle derivative conflagrations from the primordial source. They disseminated this vital understanding with neighboring villages, and soon fire was propagating throughout the mortal realm. People began preparing their provisions, imbuing their dwellings with warmth, and extending their productive hours beyond twilight. They forged novel implements and intricate artisanal creations, and consequently, their existence was rendered incalculably less arduous. But Zeus perceived the profound transformation. From his exalted vantage point on Mount Olympus, he could discern the minuscule pinpricks of luminescence strewn across the terrestrial sphere, where mortal habitations had mastered the art of ignition. At first, he was initially possessed by a fleeting inquisitiveness. Subsequently, a profound mistrust took root. Ultimately, an incandescent wrath consumed him. Who bestowed fire upon the humans? He inquired imperiously, summoning the entirety of the Olympian pantheon. A profound silence reigned. They all exchanged furtive glances, but none harbored the temerity to confess contravening Zeus's unequivocal directive. Finally, Prometheus advanced resolutely. "I did," he articulated with unadorned frankness. Zeus fixed him with an protracted, piercing gaze. When he spoke, his voice was perilously subdued, imbued with a chilling menace. "You purloined the sacred flame from the divine realm and bestowed it upon the transient inhabitants of earth. You flouted an explicit, unassailable decree. You have perpetrated the most egregious offense conceivable against the established cosmic equilibrium. Humanity was enduring immense hardship," Prometheus asserted in response. "These beings possess both intellect and capability. They are undeniably worthy of possessing the transformative power of fire. That particular judgment was not yours to render," Zeus declared with an unyielding tone. "And now you shall certainly face the dire consequences for your act of defiance." The retribution Zeus meticulously conceived was precisely tailored to mirror the gravity of the transgression. Given that Prometheus had audaciously stolen the sacred flame, he was destined to suffer an eternal torment by fire itself. Zeus issued a decree commanding that Prometheus be inextricably bound to a colossal rock within the formidable Caucasus Mountains, there to remain for the entirety of time. Yet, this perpetual imprisonment was not even the most harrowing aspect of his suffering. Each day, an immense, predatory eagle would descend upon the very rock where Prometheus was shackled. This fearsome raptor would brutally tear open Prometheus's chest cavity and voraciously consume his liver. Then, by virtue of Prometheus's inherent immortality, his vital organ would miraculously regenerate overnight, ensuring that the relentless eagle would return with the dawn to recommate this excruciating process without end. This horrifying cycle persisted for countless millennia. With the advent of each new morning, Prometheus would awaken upon his desolate crag, his body miraculously restored from the previous day's unimaginable torment, yet acutely aware that the menacing silhouette of the eagle would soon darken the sky. Every evening, he would inevitably succumb to unconsciousness, overwhelmed by the excruciating agony, only to regain his senses the following dawn and prepare to confront the same horrific ordeal once more. One might naturally assume that after a mere few decades, or perhaps even several centuries, Prometheus would surely come to regret his monumental decision. However, the ancient narratives recount that he never wavered in his conviction. Even amidst the most profound depths of his suffering, he would cast his gaze earthward and witness the burgeoning luminescence of human civilization, its lights growing ever brighter and more multitudinous across the landscape. He would behold grand cities taking shape, intricate works of art being meticulously crafted, and invaluable knowledge being disseminated far and wide. Humankind had indeed wielded the gift of fire with profound responsibility, just as Prometheus had unfalteringly believed they would. They had masterfully developed sophisticated agricultural practices, advanced medical understanding, and groundbreaking technological innovations. They had cultivated the ability to fashion objects of exquisite beauty and to extend aid and comfort to one another. Fire had served as the indispensable key that had unlocked their boundless potential, and observing that potential so magnificently realized rendered Prometheus's otherwise unbearable suffering a burden he could endure. On occasion, during crisp, clear nights, humans would direct their gaze skyward toward the twinkling constellations and recall the poignant saga of Prometheus. They would tend their own hearths and bonfires with a heightened degree of vigilance, understanding implicitly that an extraordinary being had paid an unspeakably terrible price to bestow upon them this invaluable gift. They would recount to their progeny the tale of the benevolent god who had prioritized their well-being above his own personal safety and comfort. And in this enduring remembrance, Prometheus's profound sacrifice became intrinsically woven into the very essence of fire itself. Each instance, humanity gathered around a flickering hearth. Every time they prepared a nourishing meal or illuminated a lamp, they were, in essence, participating in a quiet yet powerful act of defiance against the notion that some beings are inherently deserving of comfort, while others are condemned to an existence of perpetual suffering. The venerable tales inform us that ultimately, after an immeasurable span of many thousands of years, Prometheus was finally liberated from his unyielding chains. But that particular chapter of his epic journey is a narrative reserved for another evening. Tonight, as you prepare to embrace the embrace of sleep, perhaps you might find yourself appreciating the ambient warmth and gentle light surrounding you with a slightly greater depth of gratitude, knowing that, according to these ancient narratives, these seemingly simple gifts were acquired at an incalculable cost. Fire persists as one of humanity's most potent instruments, however. It also stands as one of our most perilous. In tranquil moments such as these, we are afforded the opportunity to contemplate the profound responsibility that accompanies such immense power and the critical importance of utilizing our extraordinary gifts with judicious wisdom and profound compassion for all living beings. There exists a certain serene tranquility in the ceaseless rhythm of the changing seasons, does there not? The gentle, gradual transition as autumn gracefully yields to the embrace of winter and the inevitable return of spring, laden with its vibrant promise of renewal. Tonight's narrative endeavors to illuminate the fundamental reasons for the existence of seasons themselves and to explain how a youthful goddess, known as Persephone, came to embody the crucial link between the vibrant world of the living and the shadowy, enigmatic realm of the dead. Persephone was the cherished daughter of Demeter, the revered goddess who presided over the bountiful harvest and all manner of growing things. Should you ever have witnessed a vast field of golden wheat undulating gracefully in the gentle summer breeze, or observed a kaleidoscope of flowers unfurling their petals in a meticulously tended garden, you have, in fact, borne witness to the tireless efforts of Demeter. She bore the weighty responsibility for every single entity that sprang forth from the fertile earth, from the most delicate, unassuming wildflower to the most majestic and ancient oak tree. Persephone, in turn, inherited her venerated mother's deep-seated affection for all things that grew. However, her expression of this profound love manifested in a distinctly different manner. While Demeter operated on an expansive, grand scale, bestowing verdant fertility upon entire sprawling regions, Persephone found her true calling in nurturing individual plants and blossoms. She would dedicate countless hours within sun-dappled meadows, gently coaxing shy violets to unfurl their petals and meticulously assisting nascent saplings in locating the most advantageous positions for their developing root systems. She was, by the celestial standards of goddesses, still quite young, possessing that infectious kind of boundless enthusiasm that springs from perceiving the world as an endless tapestry of exhilarating possibilities. With each dawning day, she would awaken brimming with eagerness about the novelties she might uncover. Would she chance upon an entirely new species of flower, hitherto unknown? Would she successfully guide a struggling plant towards the life-giving embrace of sunlight? Would she forge new friendships with the graceful deer and nimble rabbits that inhabited the very meadows she so tenderly cared for? Demeter naturally adored her daughter beyond measure, yet she was simultaneously intensely protective of her. The terrestrial world, she knew, could harbor considerable peril, even for divine beings, and Persephone's inherently trusting and innocent nature frequently stirred anxieties within Demeter's heart. Consequently, she preferred to keep Persephone close to their celestial abode, engaged in her work within the secure, familiar confines of the meadows adjacent to their dwelling. "There is such an abundance to explore right here," Demeter would gently assert, whenever Persephone voiced an interest in venturing further afield. Why embark on a quest for adventure when there are so many exquisite flowers right in our immediate vicinity that truly require your compassionate attention? Persephone, for her part, comprehended her mother's well-intentioned concerns, but she also experienced an undeniable sense of restless yearning. While she genuinely cherished her work, an irresistible desire to witness more of the vast world gnawed at her. She longed to encounter other gods and goddesses, to immerse herself in diverse ways of living, and to unveil the mysteries that lay far beyond the established boundaries of her mother's verdant domain. One particularly vibrant spring morning, Persephone was diligently tending to her duties in an exceptionally picturesque meadow, one overflowing with a profusion of narcissus flowers. These particular blossoms held a unique and almost mystical quality. They exuded a sweet, profoundly intoxicating fragrance, capable of lulling one into forgetting all worldly troubles if inhaled too deeply. Persephone, ever cautious, exercised prudence when in their vicinity, but she was utterly captivated by their exquisite beauty and the ethereal glow they seemed to emit in the soft morning light. She was kneeling gracefully beside a dense cluster of these captivating narcissus, gently encouraging them to achieve their fullest bloom, when her gaze was drawn to something undeniably peculiar. A singular flower, conspicuously larger and more breathtakingly beautiful than all the others, was growing at the very periphery of the meadow, in a location where she was absolutely certain no flower had ever existed before. This blossom was nothing short of extraordinary. Its delicate petals were as pristine white as freshly fallen snow, yet they appeared to encapsulate the entire spectrum of the rainbow, subtly shifting and transforming in color as the ambient light caressed them. Its fragrance proved even more profoundly intoxicating than that of the other narcissus, carrying faint, alluring hints of golden honey and the refreshing essence of summer rain. Persephone approached this enigmatic flower with an instinctive caution. An indefinable quality about it felt profoundly different from the myriad plants she typically cultivated. It did not possess the familiar aura of one of her mother's magnificent creations, nor did it seem to have sprung forth organically from nature's own design. Instead, it bore the unmistakable impression of being deliberately planned, meticulously placed, as if someone had specifically positioned it there for her, and only her, to discover. She knelt beside the radiant blossom and tentatively extended a hand to caress its petals. They felt remarkably soft and surprisingly warm, and the very instant her fingers made contact, the flower began to radiate an even more intense brilliance. The very ground surrounding it seemed to throb with a palpable, unseen energy. It was at that precise, pivotal moment that the earth itself began to cleave open. This was no violent seismic rupture akin to an earthquake. Instead, the very ground simply parted with an unnerving fluidity, much like water, creating a vast, gaping chasm that plunged precipitously into an abyss of profound darkness. From this newly formed aperture emerged a majestic chariot, drawn by 4 magnificent black horses, their coats so intensely dark that they appeared to absorb all ambient light. The driver of this formidable vehicle was a figure of immense stature and imposing presence, clad in robes that seemed to be woven from the very fabric of shadow itself. This formidable being was Hades, the undisputed god of the underworld, the sovereign ruler of the departed. He was a deity who rarely ventured forth from his subterranean dominion, but when he did, it was invariably for matters of utmost consequence. On this particular day, his crucial business was Persephone. He had been observing her intently for many months, meticulously noting how she interacted with plants and flowers, how she infused life and beauty into every corner she graced. The underworld, he knew, was a desolate, monochromatic realm, utterly devoid of vitality, and Hades himself was consumed by a profound loneliness. He had convinced himself that Persephone's radiant presence alone would infuse his bleak kingdom with a much-needed measure of warmth and life. What he had entirely failed to contemplate, however, was whether Persephone herself would willingly choose to accompany him. "You are compelled to come with me," Hades commanded, his voice reverberating with an eerie resonance in the open air. "The underworld yearns for your presence. I myself am in dire need of you." Persephone, composed despite the sudden dramatic turn of events, rose gracefully to her feet, casually brushing specks of dirt from her hands. "I am indeed honored by your unexpected invitation," she replied with an unshakable politeness. "However, I have pressing duties to attend to here. Perhaps we could arrange for a visit at some future time, when my schedule is not quite so demanding." Hades, in response, appeared genuinely bewildered. He was entirely accustomed to receiving unquestioning obedience. The spectral inhabitants of the underworld certainly never dared to dispute his commands, and the rare living individuals who chanced upon him were typically too paralyzed by terror to do anything but comply with his every pronouncement. "You fundamentally misunderstand the situation," he declared, his tone now laced with an undeniable authority. "This is not a mere request. You are coming with me now, without further discussion." Before Persephone could even formulate a retort, Hades swiftly extended his arm and effortlessly lifted her into his dark chariot. The 4 black horses, as if anticipating their master's will, immediately surged forward, carrying the chariot precipitously down through the newly opened chasm in the earth. Persephone instinctively cried out for her mother, but they were already plunging too deeply into the subterranean depths for her desperate plea to carry to the world above. The ensuing journey to the underworld was an experience utterly unlike anything Persephone had ever before encountered. They traversed vast, echoing caverns and intricate networks of tunnels, passing by hidden underground rivers and immense, desolate, empty spaces. The deeper they descended into the earth's core, the more profound and oppressive the silence became, until the only discernible sounds were the rhythmic thud of the horses' hooves and the low rumble of the chariot's wheels rolling over the unyielding stone. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they arrived at Hades' formidable palace. It possessed a magnificent grandeur all its own, meticulously carved from obsidian black stone and illuminated by torches that burned with an unsettling, cold blue flame. Every element within was arranged with an impeccable order and maintained with spotlessly clean precision, yet it was also eerily quiet and profoundly devoid of any discernible sign of life. The formidable Hades extended a greeting to Persephone, assisting her descent from the grand chariot as they arrived at what he declared her new dwelling. Persephone surveyed the magnificent yet chilling and somewhat stark splendor of the subterranean palace. With a measured tone, she acknowledged its grandeur, remarking, "Its scale is certainly remarkable." However, she promptly articulated her inability to remain, citing her mother's impending distress and her vital obligations in the sunlit world above. Hades then escorted her to a sumptuously appointed chamber, replete with every conceivable amenity for her comfort. The focal point was a resplendent bed, crafted from gleaming silver and precious ivory, draped lavishly with silken throws. Adjacent, towering bookshelves groaned under the weight of countless rare literary treasures, while unique windows offered vistas of meticulously cultivated subterranean gardens. A capacious wardrobe, overflowing with regal attire, further emphasized her intended status, such as every detail has been meticulously arranged for your convenience, Hades assured her, his voice resonating with a certainty that she would find ample solace within these confines. What the Lord of the Underworld had evidently failed to anticipate, however, was the profound aversion Persephone would develop for her subterranean confinement. Her very being was accustomed to the radiant warmth of the sun, the invigorating embrace of crisp air, the melodic chorus of avian life, and the gentle whisper of foliage. While the underworld possessed a peculiar, stark grandeur, it was simultaneously suffocatingly oppressive and eerily devoid of sound. Crucially, her thoughts were consumed by the welfare of her mother, Demeter. She foresaw Demeter's inevitable descent into a state of utter frenzy upon realizing her daughter's disappearance, embarking on an exhaustive, all-encompassing search, inevitably forsaking her sacred responsibilities in a desperate quest to locate her beloved offspring. Indeed, these dire predictions materialized with precise accuracy. Upon Demeter's return to her familiar abode, she discovered the verdant meadow eerily desolate, save for a solitary, enigmatic narcissus bloom, the sole, silent testament to an extraordinary event. An immediate, chilling premonition of calamity seized her. She embarked upon an relentless odyssey, traversing every meadow, penetrating every dense forest, and scaling every imposing mountain. Her anguished cries for Persephone echoing until her voice was reduced to a raw, rasping whisper. Concurrently, as Demeter's profound anguish intensified, her divine capacity to nourish and sustain Earth's fecundity began to wane catastrophically. Agricultural yields plummeted, trees ceased their bounteous fruit production, and vibrant blossoms withered into dust. The very soil, once teeming with potential, appeared to relinquish its fundamental capacity to foster and sustain existence. Concurrently, within the somber confines of the underworld, Persephone maintained a steadfast refusal to consume any sustenance. This abstention stemmed partly from her profound emotional distress, which had entirely suppressed her appetite, but predominantly from a widely circulated belief. Partaking of food within Hades' domain would irrevocably tether her to that infernal realm. Her fervent hope, therefore, was that by diligently refraining from eating, she could preserve the possibility of an eventual repatriation to her former life and her mother's embrace. Hades, for his part, exhausted every conceivable stratagem to alleviate her discomfort and win her favor. He presented her with lavish offerings of shimmering precious gemstones and irreplaceable ancient tomes. He personally guided her through the most breathtaking and awe-inspiring vistas of his vast, shadowy kingdom. He regaled her with intricate narratives recounting the ancient history of the underworld and expounded upon the profound, critical role he played in upholding the delicate equilibrium between existence and demise. Yet despite his persistent efforts, none of his endeavors bore fruit. Persephone, though unfailingly courteous in her demeanor, maintained an undeniable emotional remoteness, her yearning for her homeland and her maternal bond palpably evident. Following an extended period, spanning several weeks, during which this grim impasse persisted, the supreme Olympian deity, Zeus, ultimately felt compelled to intervene. The terrestrial conditions had deteriorated to an alarmingly critical state. Humanity faced widespread starvation as agricultural yields had entirely ceased. Fauna perished en masse due to the plant's failure to propagate new seeds. A dire prognosis loomed. Without immediate decisive action, the totality of life on Earth faced an imminent and catastrophic extinction. Consequently, Zeus dispatched Hermes, the swift-footed herald of the gods, to the chthonic realm, tasked with brokering a resolution with Hades. The divine imperative conveyed was unequivocally stark: restore Persephone to her grieving mother without delay, or confront the cataclysmic repercussions of permitting all terrestrial existence to utterly vanish. Hades found himself ensnared in an exceedingly precarious predicament. While his affection for Persephone was undeniably sincere, he simultaneously grasped the profound and widespread suffering his actions had unleashed upon the upper world. He consented to her liberation, but stipulated a singular, non-negotiable term: she must dedicate a portion of every year to residing within his subterranean kingdom. The precise accord ultimately forged between the deities dictated that Persephone would fulfill her role as Hades' queen for 6 months annually within the underworld, dedicating the remaining 6 months to her mother in the vibrant upper world. During her subterranean sojourn, Demeter would be consumed by profound grief over her daughter's absence, manifesting as a period when the earth itself would grow frigid and infertile. Conversely, during Persephone's return to the surface, Demeter's joy would be boundless, causing the world to burgeon with vibrant life and unparalleled fecundity. However, a significant complication arose. Mere moments before Hermes' arrival to escort her back to her familiar domain, Persephone had at last succumbed and consumed a small quantity of food. Her protracted confinement beneath the earth had gradually eroded her steadfast determination, leading her to ingest precisely 6 seeds from a pomegranate. In accordance with the unyielding statutes of the underworld, this act irrevocably decreed that she was obligated to spend 6 months of every year within Hades' dominion. While certain iterations of this ancient narrative posit that Persephone's consumption of the seeds was an unwitting act, other accounts subtly insinuate a deliberate choice. Having spent a considerable duration in the chthonic realm, she had evidently begun to grasp the profound significance of Hades' pivotal duties, and had, perhaps unexpectedly, developed a degree of genuine fondness for the solitary deity who had orchestrated her presence there. Irrespective of the underlying motivations for her action, the ultimate outcome remained unchanged. Persephone assumed her designated role as the sovereign queen of the underworld for precisely half of every annual cycle. For the remaining half, she journeyed back to the surface world, assisting her mother in the vital task of nurturing Earth's boundless fertility. This cyclical arrangement, as posited by the ancient Hellenes, serves as the fundamental explanation for the existence of the seasons. During Persephone's tenure in the subterranean realm, the world experiences winter, a period when all burgeoning life lies dormant in anticipation of her reappearance. Conversely, upon her ascent to the surface, spring emerges, and the entire world stirs anew, awakening to fresh vitality and boundless potential. This profound narrative intimates that, on occasion, the most transformative shifts in human existence do not originate from individual volition, but rather from the acquired ability to acclimate and adjust to situations over which one had no initial control. Persephone, through her unique predicament, ultimately devised a method to uphold both her filial obligation to her mother and her inherent responsibilities to the chthonic domain, thereby forging a delicate equilibrium that enabled both distinct realms to flourish harmoniously. While many tales recount the triumphs of protagonists who prevail through sheer physical prowess or astute intellectual cunning, the subsequent narrative focuses on a different kind of hero. This account delves into the saga of an individual who nearly achieved his objective through the transcendent influence of melody and rhythm, illustrating how the most fundamental human emotions can, at times, unravel even the most valiant and extraordinary endeavors. Orpheus, a figure of legendary renown, was the esteemed progeny of Apollo, the revered deity of music and lyrical verse, and one of the 9 inspirational muses who ignited the creative sparks in artists and literary figures. Given such an illustrious lineage, it came as no great astonishment that Orpheus entered the world endowed with an unparalleled, prodigious aptitude for musical expression. Nevertheless, his innate genius transcended all expectations, surpassing even the lofty standards typically anticipated from the offspring of an Olympian god. Whenever Orpheus drew his fingers across the strings of his lyre, an almost miraculous transformation enveloped the natural world. Blossoms would burst forth in vibrant hues, defying the constraints of their designated seasons. Towering trees would spontaneously dislodge their roots, gracefully migrating closer to better absorb the ethereal strains of his melody. Even the mighty rivers, altering their established courses, would meander nearer to the source of his enchanting performance. Ferocious beasts of the wild, shedding their inherent savagery, would become docile and benevolent. Fearsome lions would recline contentedly beside vulnerable lambs, while predatory hawks perched serenely alongside timid mice. Yet the most profound and astonishing attribute of Orpheus's musical artistry resided in its unparalleled impact upon the human spirit. As his notes resonated, long-standing adversaries would relinquish their bitter disputes and extend gestures of reconciliation. Individuals weighed down by sorrow would discover profound solace. Those consumed by rage would experience an unexpected tranquility. And every soul privileged enough to hear his compositions would be transported to a vivid recollection of genuine, unadulterated joy. Orpheus, keenly aware of the extraordinary power he wielded, exercised his exceptional talent with utmost conscientiousness. He journeyed tirelessly from one locale to another, offering his musical prowess to individuals in dire need of spiritual succor or emotional restoration. His compassionate itinerary included visits to infirmaries, where he performed for the ailing, and appearances at matrimonial ceremonies, where his melodies served to consecrate new unions. He also provided profound solace to those grappling with profound bereavement. Indeed, his harmonious compositions functioned as a potent balm, a veritable elixir for the human spirit. It was on a particular afternoon, as he performed his artistry in a sun-dappled meadow adjacent to a quaint village, that Orpheus encountered a captivating young woman named Eurydice. She was a sylvan nymph, one of the ethereal nature spirits who made their homes amidst the verdant forests and expansive grasslands. Eurydice possessed an undeniable physical allure, yet it was her unique manner of engaging with his musical expressions that truly captivated Orpheus. Typically, when audiences listened to Orpheus's performances, they would often drift into a state of reverie, appearing distant and utterly entranced by the enchanting power of his compositions. Eurydice, however, listened with an unwavering, profound attentiveness, her gaze luminous and acutely concentrated. She seemed to possess an intuitive grasp, not merely of the melodic structures, but also of the profound emotional resonance and intrinsic significance embedded within each individual note. Upon the conclusion of his mesmerizing performance, Eurydice gracefully advanced towards him. "Your musical artistry spins intricate narratives," she observed, her voice imbued with genuine appreciation. Within the strains of that final composition, I could distinctly perceive the unfolding of entire vivid realms. Orpheus experienced immense gratification at encountering an individual who possessed such a profound and authentic comprehension of his creative endeavors. They soon engaged in an extensive conversation, during which they unearthed a remarkable confluence of shared passions and convictions. Both cherished the intrinsic beauty of the natural world. Both harbored a deep-seated commitment to disseminating aesthetic pleasure and solace among their fellow beings. Moreover, both were united in their fervent belief that the expressive mediums of music and poetry served as potent instruments for the betterment and upliftment of the world. Their affection blossomed organically, a slow and tender unfolding as they dedicated countless extended afternoons to their shared companionship amidst the sun-drenched meadows and ancient whispering forests. Orpheus would often serenade her with his lyre, while Eurydice, in turn, would dance with such ethereal grace that her fluid movements appeared to be a visible manifestation of his very melody. She would recount enchanting narratives detailing the secluded, mysterious corners of the woodland, and he, inspired by her words, would transmute these captivating tales into evocative musical compositions. Their nuptial celebration was universally acclaimed as one of the most exquisitely beautiful festivities ever witnessed. The sacred rites unfolded within a secluded grove where, defying the autumnal season, every tree burst forth with vibrant blossoms, a testament to the extraordinary nature of the union. A venerable assembly of Olympian gods and goddesses graced the occasion, accompanied by a joyous retinue of nymphs, satyrs, and the diverse inhabitants of the surrounding woodlands. Orpheus, with his unparalleled artistry, performed melodies that elicited collective tears of profound happiness, while Eurydice moved with such an otherworldly elegance that she appeared to glide weightlessly, almost suspended in the air. For the duration of a full year, their lives were intertwined in a state of unblemished felicity. Orpheus's musical compositions, imbued with the profound inspiration drawn from his deep affection for Eurydice, attained an even greater, more sublime beauty. She, with her insightful perspective, guided him in refining his artistry, imbuing his melodies with enhanced tenderness and a more potent, restorative quality. As a harmonious duo, they journeyed to regions afflicted by human suffering, extending solace and rekindling hope through their combined gifts of enchanting music and graceful movement. Yet their idyllic contentment proved inherently ephemeral, mirroring the delicate and transient nature of all mortal joys. On a particular summer afternoon, while Orpheus was immersed in the refinement of a novel composition, Eurydice strolled through a sun-drenched meadow. Her purpose was to gather an assortment of blossoms to weave into a celebratory crown for her beloved's hair, and she moved with meticulous care through the rustling, tall grasses. So utterly absorbed was she in her quest for the ideal floral specimens that she remained entirely oblivious to the impending peril until the fatal moment arrived. A serpent, startled by the subtle vibrations of her approach, launched a swift, defensive strike. Its venomous fangs penetrated her ankle, delivering a potent toxin that swiftly permeated her circulatory system within a matter of mere minutes. By the time Orpheus, alerted by her sudden piercing cry, rushed to her side, his beloved Eurydice was already in the throes of death. Orpheus cradled her in his embrace as the vitality ebbed from her form. He attempted to strum his lyre, fervently hoping that the resonant strains of his music might miraculously mend her fading life. Yet, for the very first time in his illustrious existence, the power of melody felt utterly ineffectual. No composition, however poignant, possessed the capacity to recall the departed. No harmonious arrangement could reverse the inexorable course of what had transpired. Eurydice's final utterance, a tender whisper, implored him, "Cease not your playing. The world stands in need of your music." Following the tragic demise of Eurydice, Orpheus plunged into a profound and debilitating melancholia. He found himself unable to partake of sustenance, to succumb to slumber, or to derive any vestige of joy from the tapestry of life. His once vibrant compositions now transformed into sorrowful and spectral laments, serving as a direct reflection of his overwhelming anguish. When he now performed, his audience would be moved to tears rather than finding solace. The ancient trees, which had once swayed and danced gracefully to his enchanting melodies, now stood utterly motionless, as if they too were engaged in a silent, collective act of mourning. For an indeterminate period spanning many months, Orpheus roamed the terrestrial sphere, his lyre echoing with haunting ballads of profound loss and unyielding yearning. Nothing seemed capable of offering him consolation. Well-intentioned companions, with benevolent hearts, endeavored to persuade him that he must eventually come to terms with Eurydice's death and endeavor to continue with his existence. However, Orpheus found himself utterly incapable of relinquishing his grief. His devotion to her was too immense, and he could not conceive of a future devoid of her cherished presence. Ultimately, he arrived at a momentous decision, one that no mortal being had ever before dared to contemplate. He resolved to descend into the chthonic realm of the underworld and beseech Hades, the formidable ruler of the dead, to restore Eurydice to him. Every individual he encountered unequivocally declared this undertaking to be an impossibility. The departed, they asserted, could not, under any circumstances, return to the sphere of the living. This was regarded as the most fundamental and immutable law of existence itself. Death was an eternal state, and even the omnipotent gods were powerless to alter such a decree. Nevertheless, Orpheus possessed a singular advantage, an unparalleled gift that set him apart from all others: his extraordinary music. If anyone could possibly sway Hades into making an unprecedented exception, it would assuredly be an individual whose artistry could stir the very core of even the unyielding god of the dead. Spin. Orpheus embarked on his perilous journey to the grim entrance of the underworld, a cavernous aperture shrouded in perpetual darkness, meticulously guarded by Cerberus, the fearsome three-headed hound. Cerberus's primary duty was to vigilantly prevent any living soul from transgressing the boundary into the spectral domain of the deceased. Yet, when Orpheus commenced to play his lyre, even this formidable and terrifying beast was utterly captivated and charmed. All three of its monstrous heads gradually succumbed to slumber, allowing Orpheus to proceed unimpeded and unmolested into the depths. The odyssey through the subterranean realm of the underworld proved to be both protracted and profoundly uncanny. Orpheus continued to strum his lyre as he traversed its labyrinthine paths, and his ethereal music exerted extraordinary effects upon the myriad spirits of the dead. Souls that had been perpetually tormented by the weight of their past transgressions experienced, for the first time since their demise, a profound sense of tranquility. The unending punishments meted out to the wicked were momentarily suspended as they, too, paused in their suffering to absorb the poignant strains of his melodies. At length, Orpheus arrived at the imposing palace of Hades and Persephone. The sovereign couple sat upon their majestic thrones, intently listening to the dispatches from their numerous servants, who reported on the peculiar and unprecedented disturbance that had permeated their realm. As Orpheus entered, his lyre still resonating with its captivating harmonies, both deities fell into a profound silence. Orpheus then performed the most exquisite and moving music of his entire life. He played compositions that spoke of the profound depths of love and the piercing agony of loss, of the ephemeral beauty inherent in life and the unbearable pain of separation. His melodies artfully captured the very essence of nascent spring mornings and languid summer evenings, of joyous laughter and sorrowful tears, of buoyant hope and crushing despair. As his performance unfolded, something truly unprecedented occurred. Hades, the austere and unyielding god of the dead, who had never before displayed any semblance of emotion, began to openly weep. Persephone, who, having experienced her own painful separations from loved ones, understood the profound ache of such circumstances, shed tears unreservedly. Throughout the entire underworld, the countless spirits of the departed momentarily ceased their eternal routines to lend an attentive ear to music that vividly reawakened memories of all they had irrevocably lost. When Orpheus concluded his masterful performance, he humbly knelt before the majestic throne and formally presented his heartfelt request. "Please," he implored, his voice laden with a desperate plea, "restore my wife to me. I find myself utterly incapable of enduring life without her presence, and the world itself has become immeasurably darker in her absence." Hades and Persephone exchanged a solemn glance. What Orpheus was asking for was an act that had never before been countenanced. The inherent natural order of existence unequivocally dictated that the deceased must remain within the confines of death. However, they had been profoundly moved by the sheer artistry of his music, and they fully comprehended the immeasurable depth of his enduring love. After a protracted and weighty silence, Hades finally spoke. "I shall indeed grant your extraordinary request, but it comes with one immutable condition. Eurydice will follow you out of the underworld, but you must, under no circumstances, cast a glance backward at her until both of you have successfully emerged into the surface world. If you turn around even a single time before you are both bathed in the sunlight, she will be irrevocably lost to you forever." Orpheus assented immediately, without a moment's hesitation. The stipulated condition seemed, on the surface, straightforward enough to fulfill. He would lead the way, his lyre emitting gentle, guiding melodies to ensure their safe passage through the intricate tunnels and winding passages of the underworld. As long as he maintained his gaze fixed firmly forward and kept his resolve steadfastly focused on their ultimate objective, he believed everything would unquestionably proceed as planned. The initial phase of their journey commenced auspiciously. Orpheus played soft, encouraging music, its notes resonating gently as they traversed the gloomy, dark passages. Behind him, he could distinctly discern Eurydice's footsteps, light and intimately familiar. She was, he assured himself, truly present, genuinely following him back to the vibrant world of the living. Yet, as their arduous travel continued, insidious doubts began to insinuate themselves into Orpheus's mind. The faint footsteps trailing him were exceedingly light. What if, he pondered, he was merely imagining them? What if Hades had cunningly deceived him, and no one was actually following him at all? What if Eurydice had grown weary and was gradually falling behind? The closer they drew to the surface, the more intensely these gnawing uncertainties proliferated. Orpheus yearned desperately to pivot and confirm Eurydice's continued presence, but he strenuously compelled himself to maintain his forward gaze. The condition had been unequivocally clear, absolutely no looking back until both of them were fully bathed in the sunlight. Finally, After what felt like an eternity, Orpheus perceived a glimmer of light ahead. It was the authentic radiance of sunlight, not the cold, spectral flames that illuminated the underworld. He quickened his pace, consumed by an eager anticipation to reach the surface and behold his beloved wife once more. The light intensified, growing progressively brighter and more brilliant, until at last he stepped out of the cavernous entrance and into the gentle warmth of the afternoon sun. He had successfully returned to the vibrant world of the living. He had accomplished his seemingly impossible feat. He had persuaded Hades to release Eurydice, and together they had triumphantly navigated the perilous journey through the underworld. All that remained was to turn around and enfold his wife in a loving embrace. But the instant Orpheus turned, his gaze fell upon Eurydice, still shrouded in the lingering shadows of the cave, merely a few steps from the life-giving sunlight. She was extending her hand towards him, a faint smile gracing her features, but she had not quite managed to cross the final threshold into the upper world. The very moment their eyes met, her form began to dissipate, to etherealize. She looked at him with an expression of profound love and understanding, yet also with an unmistakable sadness. She had been so agonizingly close to being resurrected, but now she was being inexorably drawn back into the dominion of the dead. "Farewell, my love," she whispered, her voice barely audible as her form completely vanished. "Do not neglect to play music for the world." Yasuind. Orpheus frantically attempted to pursue her back into the underworld, but now that he had irrevocably breached the sacred condition, the entrance was hermetically sealed against him. He desperately played his lyre, hoping against hope to once more charm his way past the formidable guardians, but his efforts proved utterly futile. He had been granted his solitary opportunity, and that fleeting instant of doubt had cost him absolutely everything. Orpheus dedicated the remainder of his life to creating and performing music that was simultaneously exquisitely beautiful and profoundly heartbreaking. His compositions carried the immense weight of his personal loss, but they also preserved the cherished memory of a perfect and enduring love. Those who had the privilege of hearing him play came to understand, through his melodies, that love and loss were intrinsically inseparable components of the universal human experience. The timeless narrative of Orpheus and Eurydice serves as a poignant reminder that even the most valiant and heroic endeavors can be tragically undone by deeply human moments of doubt and apprehension. Yet, it also illuminates the profound truth that love, even when it culminates in sorrowful loss, possesses the transformative power to create something of transcendent beauty that ultimately outlasts the pain. Orpheus's extraordinary music continued to offer solace and inspiration to countless individuals long after his own demise, thereby proving that love has the remarkable capacity to transmute even the most profound sorrow into a legacy that perpetually enriches the world. Occasionally, the most magnificent aspirations harbor within them the nascent seeds of their own inevitable destruction. This particular narrative unfolds as a testament to the boundless affection of a father, the fervent ambition of a son, and the perilously fine line that separates wondrous innovation from catastrophic ruin. Daedalus was universally acknowledged as the preeminent and most skilled artisan in all of the Hellenic world. His capabilities were virtually limitless. He could construct anything imaginable, temples that appeared to ascend to celestial heights, statues so remarkably lifelike they seemed to draw breath, and intricate mechanical contrivances that moved with an uncanny autonomy. Monarchs and aristocrats from across the vast Mediterranean region would specifically dispatch emissaries to summon him when they required a creation that lay utterly beyond the capabilities of any other craftsman. However, Daedalus also possessed an overweening pride, and this very hubris led him to make fateful choices that would irrevocably alter the trajectory of his life. He had, in a sudden fit of intense jealousy, taken the life of his own nephew, harboring a deep-seated fear that the young man's prodigious talent might one day eclipse his own. As a severe penalty for this egregious crime, Daedalus was summarily exiled from Athens and compelled to seek employment in distant foreign lands. He eventually found himself on the island of Crete, where he entered the service of King Minos. The monarch commissioned him to construct a labyrinth, an architectural marvel so extraordinarily intricate and complex that no one who ventured within its convoluted passages could ever hope to discover their egress. This labyrinth was ingeniously designed to contain the Minotaur, a monstrous creature that was a hybrid of man and bull, and it stood as Daedalus's supreme masterpiece of engineering prowess. The labyrinth was so flawlessly conceived and expertly constructed that it fulfilled its intended purpose with absolute perfection. The fearsome Minotaur was effectively contained within its walls, utterly incapable of escaping to terrorize the inhabitants of Crete. Yet Daedalus had, in his genius, made the maze too well. When King Minos subsequently decided that he no longer wished for anyone to be privy to the intricate secrets of the labyrinth, he, with a cruel twist of fate, incarcerated Daedalus and his young son, Icarus, within the very maze they themselves had brought into existence. The labyrinth, it must be stated, was far from a comfortable place of confinement. It was perpetually damp and bone-chillingly cold, characterized by narrow, twisting passages that seemed to stretch into an unending abyss. There were no windows to offer a glimpse of the sky, no invigorating fresh air to breathe, and absolutely no view of the vibrant outside world. Daedalus and Icarus subsisted on meager provisions that were periodically lowered to them from above, and they spent their interminable days traversing the endless corridors, desperately attempting to locate some elusive path to freedom. Icarus, a youth perhaps in his mid-teens, aged 15 or 16 years, found the unrelenting constraint of their prison far more arduous than did his sagacious father. Having been nurtured in an environment of unrestricted liberty, he was accustomed to the exhilaration of unrestrained movement, of spirited games, and boundless exploration. The oppressive confines of the labyrinth felt to him like a suffocating sepulchre, and he frequently succumbed to profound despondency, doubting he would ever again behold the glorious radiance of the sun. Daedalus, by contrast, dedicated his hours to profound contemplation. Inherently a master of intricate problems, he steadfastly refused to concede that their dire predicament was utterly without hope. He meticulously scrutinized every single stone within the labyrinthine structure, diligently seeking any potential flaw or vulnerability in its formidable construction. He keenly observed the sentinels who delivered their sustenance, committing their daily routines and ingrained habits to memory. Every conceivable path to liberation was thoroughly assessed, yet the labyrinth was far too expertly crafted to permit a brute force escape. The guards, ever vigilant, were too numerous and cautious to be overcome by force. The towering walls, an insurmountable barrier, extended too high to be scaled. However, amidst his rigorous analysis, Daedalus discerned a pivotal detail. Birds, unfettered and graceful, traversed the expanse above the labyrinth, entering and departing with effortless ease. No intricate maze, however cunningly designed, possessed the capacity to ensnare these winged creatures, for they approached the fundamental challenge of containment from an entirely divergent perspective. This profound realization ignited a brilliant spark within Daedalus's inventive mind. With unyielding patience, he commenced the arduous task of gathering feathers from the avian inhabitants that had established their nests within the elevated reaches of the labyrinth's architecture. It was a painstakingly slow endeavor, acquiring merely a handful of feathers at any given time. Yet, with persistent effort, he gradually amassed a sufficient quantity to embark upon his ambitious undertaking. Furthermore, he resourcefully collected the residual wax from the candles the guards provided and meticulously extracted threads from his own garments. Operating under the cloak of secrecy, Daedalus embarked upon the construction of his magnificent wings. These wings represented an extraordinary feat of ingenious engineering. Daedalus meticulously arranged the collected feathers according to their graduated sizes, positioning the largest ones to form the foundational framework, and deftly employing the smaller ones to fill in the interstitial spaces. He then secured them firmly together using the slender threads and meticulously sealed all the critical junctures with the pliable wax. The culmination of this intricate labor was a pair of wings that exhibited both remarkable tensile strength and essential flexibility, precisely engineered to capture the air currents and elegantly elevate a human form into aerial flight. Icarus, watching his father's clandestine work, felt a burgeoning wave of excitement wash over him. The very notion of achieving flight was an exhilarating prospect, surpassing anything he had ever dared to conjure in his wildest imaginings. He eagerly contributed to the collection of the necessary materials and lent his assistance during the construction phase. But predominantly, his mind was consumed by vivid daydreams of the sublime sensation of soaring through the boundless sky, emulating the effortless grace of a bird. Upon the completion of the inaugural pair of wings, Daedalus carefully affixed them to his own shoulders and embarked upon a cautious series of tests. He initiated his trials with modest leaps, progressively advancing to more sustained glides. The wings performed flawlessly, effortlessly supporting his weight and affording him precise control over his trajectory and direction. Buoyed by this resounding success, Daedalus proceeded to fabricate a second pair of wings specifically tailored for Icarus. These were crafted to be smaller and considerably lighter, perfectly proportioned for the boy's youthful physique. Once both sets of these extraordinary contraptions were fully prepared, Daedalus recognized that the opportune moment had arrived to attempt their audacious escape. However, a crucial prerequisite was to impart a series of vital instructions to his eager son. "Attend closely, Icarus," Daedalus pronounced, his voice imbued with a profound seriousness and deep paternal concern. These magnificent wings are destined to transport us to the sweet embrace of freedom, yet they also harbor inherent perils. The wax, which serves as their binding agent, is exceedingly delicate. Should you descend too near to the ocean's surface, the pervasive moisture from the sea will inevitably saturate the feathers, rendering them heavy and cumbersome. Conversely, if you ascend to an excessive altitude, the intense thermal energy emanating from the sun will inevitably liquefy the wax, causing the wings to catastrophically disintegrate. Icarus offered a perfunctory nod, though his attention was clearly diffused. He was utterly captivated by the thrilling anticipation of flight, too enthralled to fully absorb the gravity of the warnings concerning potential adversities. "Remain steadfastly in my proximity," Daedalus continued with unwavering earnestness. "Emulate my flight path with absolute precision. Resist any inclination to flaunt your abilities or to experiment with ostentatious aerial maneuvers. Simply maintain a steady and circumspect flight, and we shall assuredly attain a haven of safety." "I comprehend, Father," Icarus declared, although his thoughts were already racing forward, envisioning the very instant he would first experience the exhilarating sensation of the wind's embrace lifting him aloft. They meticulously fastened their newly crafted wings and navigated their way to the labyrinth's most elevated vantage point, where a slender aperture permitted the ingress of ambient light from the heavens above. Daedalus led the way, gracefully extending his wings and stepping boldly from the precipice. For a heart-stopping moment, he plummeted, causing Icarus's heart to seize with terror. Then, with an almost miraculous grace, the wings engaged the air, and Daedalus ascended skyward, finally liberated from the intricate prison that had held him captive. Icarus followed suit, and the ensuing sensation transcended even his most vivid imaginings. The profound feeling of weightlessness, of being buoyed by nothing more substantial than air and feathers, was utterly intoxicating. He glanced downward, observing the labyrinth diminishing rapidly beneath him, then lifted his gaze to behold the immense azure expanse of the sky stretching boundlessly in every conceivable direction. They soared in unison over the picturesque island of Crete, with Daedalus guiding the way and Icarus maintaining a close formation behind him. The daring escape was unfolding with impeccable precision. They were at last free. They were together, sharing an experience that no other human being had ever before witnessed or undergone. For the initial hour of their momentous flight, Icarus adhered scrupulously to his father's explicit instructions. He maintained the prescribed altitude, neither venturing too high nor descending too low. He sustained a consistent velocity and refrained from attempting any perilous aerial acrobatics. He epitomized the perfect apprentice, meticulous and utterly compliant. However, as the passage of time lengthened, Icarus began to experience a burgeoning sense of self-assurance. The wings felt increasingly like a natural extension of his own shoulders, and the act of flying progressively seemed effortless. He found himself contemplating the possibilities of accelerating his speed, ascending to greater heights, and executing more audacious aerial feats. He began to grasp the profound joy that birds evidently derived from their graceful ascensions through the heavens. Daedalus, his attention fully engrossed in the critical tasks of navigation and vigilant observation for potential hazards, regrettably failed to perceive Icarus's gradual upward deviation. The young boy was utterly captivated by the sublime vista from his elevated position, and an insatiable desire to witness more consumed him. What novel perspectives might the world offer from an even loftier altitude? How intimately could he approach the majestic sun before its radiant heat became intolerable? From this exalted perspective, the sun appeared truly magnificent, far more brilliant and intensely warm than it ever did when viewed from the earthly ground. Icarus felt an irresistible pull towards it, akin to the inherent heliotropism of flowers turning towards the nurturing light. He commenced a higher ascent, his father's solemn admonitions utterly eclipsed by the overwhelming thrill of exploring this newly discovered celestial domain. Initially, the increased altitude bestowed a sense of exhilaration. The air grew perceptibly thinner and cooler, and Icarus felt an almost divine proximity, as if he were encroaching upon the very realm of the gods. He commanded a panoramic view extending for countless miles in every direction, and the world below unfolded like an exquisite tapestry, a living map spread out solely for his personal gratification. But as he continued his ascent, the sun's relentless heat began its insidious assault on the wax integral to his wings. The very material that had been robust and firm at sea level now became alarmingly soft and malleable under the intense solar radiation. Minute droplets of molten wax began to dislodge and fall from his wings, and, in tandem, the carefully affixed feathers commenced their perilous detachment. Icarus apprehended the gravity of the situation far too late. By the time the dreadful realization dawned upon him that his meticulously crafted wings were disintegrating, he had already soared to an altitude far too great to permit a safe, controlled glide back to the earth. He attempted to cry out to his father, but Daedalus was a distant speck far below, still meticulously maintaining the prudent altitude they had initially planned. Once the process of degradation commenced, the wings disintegrated with terrifying swiftness. Feathers, released from their bonds, scattered chaotically into the rushing wind, and the wax that had once held them together now dripped away in sorrowful rivulets like tears. Icarus frantically flapped his bare arms in a desperate, futile attempt to remain aloft. But without the essential wings, he was reduced to nothing more than a helpless boy plummeting through the vast, unforgiving sky. Daedalus, hearing his son's piercing cries, cast his gaze skyward only to witness Icarus's horrifying descent towards the tumultuous sea. He strained to fly higher, clinging to a desperate hope of intercepting his son, or at the very least reaching him before he impacted the water. But it was an impossible endeavor. The intervening distance was too immense, and Icarus was falling with an unrecoverable velocity. The young boy plunged into the ocean with a splash that seemed incredibly insignificant for such an overwhelming catastrophe. By the time Daedalus managed to reach the precise location, there remained no discernible trace of his son, save for a few scattered feathers adrift on the water's surface and the lingering, mournful echo of his son's final, heart-wrenching cry. Daedalus tirelessly circled the area for many hours, his voice hoarse as he desperately called Icarus's name, clinging to a fragile hope against all odds that his son had miraculously survived. But the boundless sea had irrevocably claimed the boy, and no amount of diligent searching could ever restore him. Eventually, Daedalus was compelled by the harsh realities of his situation to resume his solitary journey. He ultimately attained a safe haven, but the profound triumph of his audacious escape was irrevocably eclipsed by the devastating loss of his beloved son. He had indeed secured his cherished freedom, but at a cost so immense that the very notion of victory felt like an agonizing defeat. The enduring narrative of Icarus subsequently transformed into a poignant cautionary tale, warning against the inherent perils of unchecked ambition and underscoring the vital importance of heeding sage counsel. Yet it also serves as a profound meditation on the inherently dualistic nature of human aspirations. The very same wellspring of imagination and ambition that empowered Daedalus to conceive and construct the wings ultimately propelled Icarus to venture too perilously close to the sun. Perhaps the profound lesson embedded within this myth is not to eschew ambition entirely, but rather to temper it with judicious wisdom and prudent caution. Dreams are intended to elevate and inspire us, but they possess an equal capacity to lead us into grave danger if pursued with unbridled recklessness. The sky, while undeniably vast and breathtakingly beautiful, also encompasses inherent hazards that demand profound respect and meticulous navigation. As you begin to surrender to the embrace of sleep this evening, you might find yourself reflecting upon your own cherished dreams and fervent ambitions. To what lofty pinnacles do you aspire to ascend? What thoughtful precautions will you meticulously implement to ensure that your personal journey towards those heights is characterized by both audacious boldness and unwavering safety? There exists an ancient adage that advises one to exercise caution regarding one's desires, for there is always the possibility that those wishes might indeed materialize. This is the unfolding chronicle of a monarch who received precisely what he believed his heart yearned for, only to tragically discover that occasionally our most profound yearnings can metamorphose into our most devastating afflictions. King Midas presided over Phrygia, a kingdom of modest dimensions yet considerable prosperity, situated within the geographical expanse now recognized as Turkey. He was, in numerous respects, an admirable sovereign, equitable in his dealings with his subjects, munificent towards the less fortunate, and remarkably adept at managing the intricate affairs of his realm. However, Midas harbored one overwhelming, singular passion that permeated and colored every facet of his existence. He possessed an insatiable love for gold. This was far from a mere monetary valuation of riches. King Midas harbored a profound captivation for gold as a physical substance. He deeply admired its resplendent hue, its substantial heft, and its inherent immunity to corrosion. He cherished the distinctive manner in which it dazzlingly captured and dispersed luminescence, and the velvety, comforting sensation it imparted against his skin. He devoted countless hours within the confines of his treasury, not in the act of tallying his vast fortune, but rather in simply reveling in the sheer aesthetic appeal of his myriad golden artifacts. His opulent abode was replete with gleaming golden embellishments, ornate gilded furnishings, and lustrous tableware. He adorned himself with a profusion of golden circlets on each digit and elaborate golden necklets. His retinue of servants whispered jests among themselves that if King Midas could have gilded every surface of his royal chambers, he would have done so without hesitation. Despite this intensifying devotion to gold, Midas was far from an avaricious sovereign. He scrupulously refrained from imposing excessive levies upon his populace or engaging in martial conflicts solely to augment his personal wealth. The substantial gold he possessed had been amassed through scrupulous commercial dealings and sagacious stewardship of his kingdom's abundant assets. Nevertheless, it was plainly evident to all observers that his unwavering affection for the precious metal intensified with each passing season, and a quiet disquietude began to ripple through his court, as some speculated whether this intensifying devotion might, in time, precipitate unforeseen difficulties. One particular day, as Midas strolled amidst the verdant tranquility of his expansive royal gardens, he chanced upon an elderly gentleman slumbering peacefully under a luxuriant rose bush. The man was manifestly not a member of his domestic staff or horticultural team. His attire was remarkably unfamiliar and exotically styled, and he bore the weary countenance of one who had journeyed extensively and undergone considerable hardship. He was, moreover, evidently inebriated, exuding a potent vinous aroma and murmuring indistinctly in his slumber. A monarch of lesser magnanimity might readily have ordered the apprehension or expulsion of such an uninvited interloper. However, Midas, ever intrigued by the enigmatic figure, perceived, even through the man's rather disarrayed presentation, a distinctive chaplet of ivy leaves, a clear emblem denoting an affiliation with the Olympian deities. Midas forthwith instructed his attendants to usher the enigmatic wayfarer into the palatial confines, where he was afforded a restorative repast and fresh, comfortable garments. Once the effects of his intoxication had dissipated, the man revealed his identity as Silenus, a venerable satyr who held the esteemed position of confidant and mentor to Dionysus, the revered god of viticulture and revelry. Silenus recounted how he had become inadvertently detached from Dionysus's retinue amidst a particularly spirited and boisterous celebration. He had been adrift for several days, earnestly endeavoring to rejoin the divine procession. He expressed profound gratitude for Midas's exceptional benevolence, yet simultaneously conveyed an ardent desire to be reunited with his divine charge. Midas meticulously orchestrated a secure passage for Silenus, ensuring his safe return to Dionysus. It was a considerable expedition, but the king furnished a retinue of stalwart guards, ample provisions, and a commodious, well-appointed conveyance for the journey. He sought no recompense whatsoever, merely extending the time-honored courtesies of hospitality to a guest who found himself in need of succor. Upon Silenus's joyous reunion with Dionysus, he forthwith recounted to the deity the tale of King Midas's extraordinary and munificent hospitality. Dionysus found himself profoundly moved by this remarkable demonstration of compassion, especially considering that Midas had extended aid to an unknown wayfarer, entirely devoid of any knowledge of his identity or anticipation of recompense. Consequently, Dionysus resolved to bestow upon Midas a singular boon. He manifested himself to the monarch within the ethereal realm of a dream, clarifying his intention to tender a divine recompense for the kindness shown to Silenus. The divine voice intoned with solemnity, "You may have anything you desire. Ponder this deeply and select with prudence." Midas required no protracted deliberation. His response was instantaneous, propelled by the consuming, lifelong ardor he harbored for the gleaming metal. "I fervently desire," he articulated, "that every object I make contact with shall transmute into pure gold." A subtle furrow creased Dionysus's brow. "Are you absolutely resolute?" queried the god, his tone tinged with a hint of reservation. "This is a momentous petition, and its reversal is not easily accomplished." "Indeed, I am entirely convinced," Midas affirmed with unwavering conviction. "No other boon could possibly bring me greater felicity than possessing the singular ability to conjure gold with but a mere caress." Dionysus acceded to the king's fervent desire, albeit with a perceptible degree of hesitation. The divine pantheon possessed a long and often somber history concerning the impetuous aspirations of mortals, knowing full well that such hastily conceived boons seldom culminated in favorable outcomes. Yet Midas had demonstrated genuine benevolence toward Silenus, and thus his petition merited fulfillment. As Midas roused himself from slumber the ensuing morning, a lingering doubt prompted him to question the veracity of his nocturnal vision. With a hesitant extension of his hand, he made contact with the unadorned timber of his bedpost. In an astonishing instant, the humble timber transmuted into resplendent, shimmering gold. His fingers then brushed against his pillow, which immediately solidified into a golden cushion, undeniably beautiful, yet possessing a decidedly unyielding and uncomfortable texture. The blanket, too, yielded to his touch, becoming a magnificent golden drapery, visually splendid but impossibly weighty and stiff. A surge of unbridled exhilaration coursed through Midas. The divine boon had indeed been bestowed. Leaping from his bed with fervent eagerness, he commenced to lay his hand upon every object within his bedchamber. His garments metamorphosed into stiff, unpliable golden raiment, utterly impractical for wear. The looking-glass transformed into a golden speculum, its brilliant reflectivity rendering it useless for its intended purpose. His wash-basin became an exquisitely golden vessel, far too precious and ostentatious for mere ablutions. He then traversed his opulent palace, extending his golden touch to walls, furnishings, and decorative embellishments alike. Every surface he contacted was instantly perfected into lustrous, breathtaking gold. His retinue of servants observed in stunned awe as their sovereign transmuted his royal residence into a veritable golden citadel, surpassing in grandeur any edifice ever conceived by humankind. However, the initial harbinger of difficulty manifested itself as Midas endeavored to attire himself. His newly acquired golden apparel proved to be excessively rigid and cumbersome, rendering it unwearable with any degree of comfort. Attempting to don his customary garments, he found that the instant his fingers grazed them, they too solidified into unyielding golden forms, impossible to wear. Ultimately, he was compelled to solicit the assistance of his attendants to dress him, exercising extreme caution to avoid direct physical contact with any item. The subsequent indication of his predicament arose during the morning repast. As Midas attempted to partake of his meal, each morsel transformed into solid gold. The instant it met his lips, the simple bread metamorphosed into a gleaming golden loaf, aesthetically pleasing, yet utterly indigestible. The succulent fruit transmuted into flawless golden effigies, impeccable in form, but entirely unconsumable. Even the refreshing wine in his goblet solidified into a viscous, molten gold, descending his throat with an unnerving metallic sensation. A stark realization dawned upon Midas. He was utterly incapable of ingesting any sustenance without its prior transformation into gold. He attempted to employ various eating implements, only to find them solidify into gold the instant his fingers closed around them. Even the expedient of having his servants present, the food proved futile, as the nourishment transmuted the moment it crossed the threshold of his lips. As the first day drew to a close, Midas found himself gripped by gnawing hunger and parching thirst, progressively apprehending the true, insidious character of his divine endowment. He had, with precise accuracy, received the very boon he had solicited, yet he had lamentably failed to contemplate its profound and devastating practical ramifications. How could existence be sustained if sustenance itself was denied? How could human interaction be maintained if every touch brought about such an irreversible and isolating transformation? The true, heart-wrenching catastrophe descended upon him when his beloved young daughter, her face alight with innocent joy, bounded forth to greet him. Having been absent on a visit to kinsfolk, she had been deprived of her father's presence for several days. Eager to learn of the curious occurrences that had transpired within the palace, she impulsively rushed into his embrace before any attendant could intervene. The instant Midas's arms enveloped his cherished child, she was agonizingly transmuted into a shimmering, lifeless golden effigy. She stood breathtakingly beautiful, rendered with exquisite perfection in every minute detail. Yet tragically, the spark of life had been extinguished. Speech had departed from her. Movement was denied. Laughter and tears were silenced, and the very breath of life had ceased. She was naught but a magnificent golden sculpture, eternally captured in the poignant act of embracing her distraught father. Midas collapsed to his knees beside the inert, golden effigy of his child, his face a mask of anguish, tears cascading ceaselessly down his grief-stricken cheeks. He had fervently coveted the unparalleled ability to fabricate gold, yet he had tragically failed to ponder that this very power would irrevocably sever his capacity to make contact with any living being. He had indeed acquired boundless riches, but in doing so, he had forfeited every single element that lent true worth to material possessions. Of what conceivable utility was untold gold if it precluded sharing it with loved ones? What genuine value could be ascribed to such immense treasure if its cost was the very capacity to hold his own daughter in his arms? He had, in his profound short-sightedness, believed gold to be the paramount treasure in existence. But in this moment of devastating clarity, he comprehended that the intangible treasures of affection, genuine human rapport, and the unadorned joys of daily existence vastly outshone any conceivable quantity of precious metal. Driven to an abyss of desperation to reverse his calamitous wish, Midas prostrated himself in fervent prayer to Dionysus, imploring divine clemency and the immediate revocation of his golden affliction. He poured out his heart, confessing his profound folly, acknowledging his utter lack of foresight in his request, and pleading that he would relinquish anything and everything to reclaim his beloved daughter. Dionysus, who had, with divine prescience, anticipated precisely such an outcome, manifested himself before Midas, bearing the means of redemption. Proceed to the sacred currents of the river Pactolus, the deity instructed. Immerse yourself completely within its flowing waters, and your cursed golden touch shall be cleansed away. Thereafter, return to your palace and liberally sprinkle the revitalizing water upon all that you desire to restore to its erstwhile condition. Midas, with a newfound urgency, hastened to the prescribed river and plunged himself fully into its cool, flowing depths. He experienced a profound sensation as the golden affliction receded from him, akin to an immense burden being lifted from his very soul. Carefully collecting a generous quantity of the miraculous water in a sizable jar, he hastened back to his royal abode, where he reverently sprinkled it upon the golden effigy of his daughter. Gradually, perceptibly, the metallic sheen receded from her form, and she stirred, returning to the realm of the living. She emerged bewildered and understandably apprehensive from her golden trance. Yet she was undeniably alive, her breath a precious reality, and capable once more of embracing her father. Midas cradled her with utmost tenderness, utterly captivated by the miraculous sensation of her warm, vibrant, living form nestled securely in his arms. He dedicated the remainder of that momentous day to meticulously restoring his palace to its former, ungilded splendor, carefully sprinkling the potent river water upon each of the myriad golden objects he had inadvertently crafted. A select few items he permitted to retain their golden aspect, choosing certain decorative pieces to serve as a perpetual, yet unobtrusive reminder of his extraordinary ordeal. However, the vast majority of his possessions, he reverted to their natural, original materials, now unequivocally preferring the organic warmth of wood, the sturdy integrity of stone, and the soft comfort of fabric over the austere, unfeeling perfection of gold. From that pivotal day onward, King Midas was utterly transformed. While he retained a discerning appreciation for the inherent beauty of gold, his former all-consuming obsession had completely dissipated. He had come to a profound realization that life's most cherished treasures, the warmth of affection, the steadfastness of camaraderie, the simple pleasure of wholesome sustenance, the comfort of modest attire, and the satisfaction of purposeful endeavor, were utterly beyond the reach of mere acquisition or creation through wealth alone. Consequently, he earned renown as a sagacious monarch who consistently prioritized the welfare of his subjects above the contents of his royal coffers. He frequently recounted the cautionary tale of his golden touch to visiting dignitaries, not with any intent of vaingloriously recounting his divine encounter, but rather to impart a solemn warning regarding the perilous pitfalls of coveting any single desire with excessive fervor. Exercise extreme circumspection in your aspirations, he would counsel gravely, for there is a distinct possibility that your deepest desires may indeed be granted. The ancient saga of King Midas serves as a potent reminder that our most fervent aspirations frequently arrive cloaked in unforeseen repercussions. It is an inherent human impulse to yearn for opulence, triumph, or dominion. Yet a crucial imperative arises to meticulously weigh the potential sacrifices required to secure these coveted objectives. Indeed, at times, the very things we believe we desire most intensely prove to hold less intrinsic worth than the treasures we already possess. As the quietude of night descends, one might find occasion to contemplate their personal aspirations and deeply held wishes. What grand achievements or possessions does an individual hope to acquire in the tapestry of life? What profound concessions or arduous efforts are they prepared to make in pursuit of such gains? And perhaps most significantly, what cherished elements of their current existence would they be unwilling to relinquish in the fervent quest for something novel? Beyond mere physical prowess, certain dilemmas defy resolution, and some monstrous entities elicit more profound pity than sheer terror. This particular narrative unfolds the journey of a nascent hero who ultimately discerned that the gravest peril lurking within any heroic endeavor was not the fearsome beast guarding its culmination, but rather the intricate and often treacherous path leading back to the sanctuary of one's own home. Theseus, a figure of destined greatness, was the legitimate son of Aegeus, the reigning monarch of Athens. However, his formative years were not spent within the gilded confines of a royal palace. Instead, his devoted mother nurtured him in a secluded, unassuming township, recounting tales of his illustrious father without ever divulging the king's true identity. She had imparted a solemn prophecy. When Theseus attained sufficient strength to dislodge a specific, immense boulder, he would unearth beneath it certain tokens that would unequivocally unveil his authentic heritage. As Theseus matured, an unwavering fascination with that monumental boulder consumed him. With each passing day, He would pilgrimage to its imposing presence, relentlessly pitting his burgeoning strength against the colossal stone. For a span of many years, it remained obstinately immobile, impervious to the force of his pushes or the myriad techniques he diligently employed. Yet his spirit was characterized by an unyielding patience and an indomitable persistence. He never once surrendered to despair. Finally, on the auspicious occasion of his 18th birthday, Theseus, through sheer determination, succeeded in shifting the formidable boulder. Beneath its weight, he discovered a finely crafted sword and a pair of worn sandals, unmistakable relics belonging to his royal father. His mother, at last, unveiled the long-guarded truth. He was unequivocally the progeny of King Aegeus, and the appointed hour had arrived for him to embark on a momentous journey to Athens and assert his rightful claim as the rightful heir to the venerable throne. The expedition to Athens was fraught with considerable peril. The winding thoroughfares teemed with opportunistic brigands, ferocious wild animals, and a diverse array of monstrous creatures that preyed mercilessly upon unsuspecting wayfarers. The vast majority of travelers opted for the sea voyage, a route universally acknowledged as both safer and considerably swifter. However, Theseus deliberately chose to traverse the land on foot, partly driven by a profound desire to test the limits of his burgeoning strength and courage, and partly fueled by an ardent yearning for exhilarating adventures. Along his arduous trek, he confronted numerous formidable challenges, vanquishing notorious bandits and malevolent beasts who had terrorized the ancient roads for generations. By the time he finally set foot in Athens, his exploits had already forged for him a formidable reputation as a burgeoning hero. King Aegeus, his father, embraced him with paternal joy as his son and rightful heir, and the populace of Athens erupted in jubilant celebration for their newly arrived prince. Yet, Theseus's auspicious arrival coincided with a period of profound tribulation for the city. Athens languished under the oppressive dominion of King Minos of Crete, who had subjugated the city years prior. As an integral component of the harsh terms of surrender, Athens was compelled to dispatch a dreadful tribute to Crete every 7 years. A grim procession of 7 vibrant young men and 7 innocent young women, destined to be offered as sustenance to the fearsome Minotaur. The Minotaur itself was a grotesque and unnatural abomination, a creature possessing the upper torso of a man and the formidable head and lower body of a bull. It was the monstrous progeny born of Minos's own wife and a revered sacred bull. This terrifying beast was perpetually confined within an intricate, bewildering labyrinth, ingeniously designed by the master architect Daedalus, and it harbored an insatiable, ravenous craving for human flesh. The periodic tribute dispatched from Athens was specifically intended to appease this creature's relentless hunger and maintain its savage satisfaction. As the ominous time for the next tribute drew near, the entire city of Athens was engulfed in a pervasive atmosphere of profound grief and palpable dread. Families were consumed by terror, agonizing over the possibility that their beloved children might be arbitrarily chosen for this grim fate, and those unfortunate souls who were indeed selected knew with chilling certainty that they were marching inexorably towards their untimely demise. Not a single individual who had ever ventured into the perplexing depths of the labyrinth had ever managed to emerge. Theseus found it utterly intolerable to witness the profound anguish of his people. With unwavering resolve, He volunteered himself as one of the 7 young men destined for Crete, harboring a clandestine plan to confront and slay the Minotaur, thereby eradicating the horrific tribute forevermore. King Aegeus, his father, desperately attempted to dissuade him from such a perilous undertaking, but Theseus remained steadfast in his determination to unequivocally prove himself as a true hero and the valiant protector of Athens. The vessel that conveyed the tragic tribute invariably sailed under a canopy of black sails, a somber emblem symbolizing the inevitable death awaiting the young Athenians. Theseus, in a heartfelt pledge to his father, promised that should he succeed in vanquishing the Minotaur, he would unfurl resplendent white sails upon his return voyage, signaling a triumphant victory. Upon the ship's arrival in Crete, Theseus and his ill-fated companions were promptly ushered into the formidable presence of King Minos. The monarch, intrigued, expressed a keen curiosity regarding this extraordinary young man who had so audaciously volunteered for such a perilous mission. He meticulously questioned Theseus about his underlying motives and his strategic intentions, but Theseus, with cunning circumspection, meticulously avoided revealing his true, lethal purpose. Among the throng of observers present at this momentous encounter was Ariadne, the captivating daughter of King Minos. She possessed both striking beauty and keen intellect, and she was instantly drawn to the courageous young Athenian. Ariadne had long harbored a deep disapproval of the brutal tribute system, and her heart was filled with profound sympathy for the dire predicament of the young people who were on the precipice of being sacrificed. Under the shroud of that very night, Ariadne clandestinely visited Theseus within his austere prison cell. She extended an offer to facilitate his escape from the treacherous labyrinth, provided he would pledge to transport her back to Athens with him. She confessed her weariness of her life in Crete, exhausted by her unwitting complicity in a system that inexorably demanded the untimely demise of innocent lives. Theseus readily assented to her proposition, and Ariadne, in turn, bestowed upon him 2 indispensable gifts. The first was a sharp sword, cunningly concealed within a basket of provisions. The second was a modest ball of thread, which she meticulously instructed him to secure firmly to the labyrinth's entrance and steadily unspool as he navigated his perilous journey through the convoluted maze. The labyrinth's very architecture is ingeniously contrived to bewilder and disorient, she elucidated with grave emphasis. Even should you manage to slay the Minotaur, you will assuredly never discern your way back out without the aid of a guide. This thread, my brave hero, will unfailingly conduct you back to the threshold of the entrance. The following dawn, Theseus and his apprehensive companions were solemnly escorted to the formidable labyrinth. The entrance appeared deceptively simple, a mere aperture in a towering stone wall. Yet beyond this unassuming opening lay an intricate, bewildering network of corridors and passages that seemed to stretch endlessly into the abyss. The walls themselves were extraordinarily high and remarkably smooth, rendering any attempt to scale them or gain an overview of the labyrinth's overall configuration utterly futile. Theseus meticulously secured one end of the vital thread to the entrance and cautiously commenced his arduous journey into the heart of the bewildering maze. He strategically left his companions stationed near the entrance, partly to ensure their immediate safety, and partly to guarantee that someone would be capable of retracing the thread's path back to the outside should any misfortune befall him. The labyrinth proved to be even more disorienting and perplexing than he had initially anticipated. The winding passages appeared to double back upon themselves with maddening regularity, and he encountered an innumerable multitude of dead ends and deceptive false paths. Without the invaluable thread, he would have been irretrievably lost within mere moments. Even with its guidance, he was compelled to advance slowly and with utmost caution, constantly verifying that the thread remained securely fastened and taut. As he ventured deeper into the convoluted heart of the maze, Theseus began to discern unsettling sounds emanating from its very core. A heavy, labored respiration, the distinctive scraping of hooves against the rough stone floor, and occasionally, a profound, rumbling bellow echoed through the oppressive silence. The Minotaur, he realized with a chilling certainty, lay in wait for him there. The creature itself was far more colossal and terrifying than Theseus had ever conjured in his imagination. It stood upright, eerily resembling a man, yet its head was that of a colossal bull, adorned with menacingly sharp horns and eyes that glowed with an infernal red luminescence in the pervasive gloom. Its powerful body was densely covered in coarse, shaggy hair, and its formidable hands terminated in razor-sharp claws that appeared capable of effortlessly rending a human being limb from limb. Yet paradoxically, an undeniable air of profound sadness also clung to the Minotaur. It had endured its entire wretched existence as a prisoner within this labyrinth, sustained by a gruesome diet of human flesh, never having known a moment of kindness or the solace of companionship. It was, in essence, as much a tragic victim of its cruel circumstances as it was a fearsome monster. Theseus experienced a fleeting, poignant moment of pity for the tormented creature. Nevertheless, he was acutely aware that it had mercilessly slaughtered countless innocent individuals. With a grim resolve, he unsheathed his sword and braced himself for the inevitable confrontation. The ensuing battle, though intensely fierce, was remarkably brief. The Minotaur, despite its immense strength and savage ferocity, possessed no weapon beyond its formidable claws and horns. Theseus, conversely, was exceptionally skilled with his blade and remarkably agile on his feet. He managed to inflict several grievous wounds upon the creature before finally delivering a fatal, piercing blow directly to its monstrous heart. As the Minotaur gasped its last breath, it fixed its dying gaze upon Theseus with an expression that seemed almost to convey a profound sense of gratitude. It had been as much a captive within the confines of the labyrinth as the young Athenians who were perpetually sent to sate its hunger. Death, for this tormented beast, represented a final, merciful release from a life defined by agonizing isolation and brutal violence. With the monstrous entity finally vanquished, Theseus commenced the arduous journey back towards the labyrinth's entrance, meticulously following his thread through the bewildering, winding passages. This particular segment of his adventure, while less exhilarating than the visceral confrontation with the Minotaur, proved to be equally, if not more, critical. Without the infallible guidance of the thread, he would have undoubtedly wandered aimlessly through the labyrinth's endless corridors until he succumbed to the slow agony of hunger and thirst. He eventually located his companions, anxiously awaiting his return at the entrance, and together they made their way with haste to the harbor where Ariadne, ever vigilant, awaited them with a ship prepared for immediate departure. They covertly set sail from Crete in the deep stillness of the night, their collective hope fixed on escaping before King Minos could possibly discover the audacious events that had transpired. The return voyage to Athens should have been a triumphant celebration, yet it was tragically marred by a grievous error. The ship made an ill-fated stop at the island of Naxos, where the weary travelers paused to rest and replenish their vital provisions. Some versions of the ancient narrative contend that Theseus deliberately abandoned Ariadne on the island, having ruthlessly extracted all the assistance he required from her. Other interpretations suggest that he inadvertently left her behind, his mind preoccupied and her presence forgotten amidst the overwhelming anticipation of his homecoming. Regardless of the precise reason, Ariadne was indeed forsaken, and Theseus, oblivious or indifferent to her fate, continued his journey towards Athens. He was so utterly consumed by the overwhelming prospect of his imminent homecoming that a crucial detail, a solemn promise, completely slipped his mind. He had pledged to his father, King Aegeus, that he would hoist white sails if his mission to slay the Minotaur had met with success. However, the ship still bore the somber black sails with which it had originally departed, those very sails that universally symbolized death and resounding defeat. King Aegeus, his heart heavy with paternal anxiety, maintained a constant vigil from a towering cliff overlooking the Athenian harbor. And when his aged eyes finally discerned the sight of the black sails, he was instantly overcome by the crushing assumption that his beloved son had been tragically slain by the monstrous Minotaur. Engulfed by an unbearable wave of grief and despair, Aegeus, in his profound sorrow, cast himself from the precipice of the cliff into the tumultuous sea below. Upon his arrival at the bustling harbor, Theseus was struck by a stark and devastating realization. His critical oversight had sealed a tragic fate. His venerable father, King Aegeus, had perished, leaving the young prince to ascend the Athenian throne amidst profoundly sorrowful and challenging conditions. For a considerable duration, Theseus presided over Athens, largely earning the appellation of a benevolent and astute monarch. He had, with undeniable courage, liberated his populace from the oppressive and grievous annual tribute exacted by Crete, thereby showcasing his prowess as a formidable and competent hero. Nevertheless, the heavy toll of his triumph remained etched upon his conscience. The unconscionable desertion of Ariadne, whose sagacity and assistance had been instrumental in his success, and the untimely demise of his father, who had, in his final moments, harbored the heartbreaking conviction that his beloved son had utterly failed. The enduring narrative of Theseus and the formidable Minotaur serves as a poignant cautionary tale, illustrating how grand heroic endeavors frequently unfold, with unforeseen and often regrettable ramifications. Indeed, the most perilous aspect of any arduous odyssey is not inherently the monstrous adversary or the daunting trial itself. Rather, it resides in the insidious manner in which the flush of victory can cause individuals to inadvertently neglect their profound obligations to those steadfast companions who offered crucial aid along their arduous path. Occasionally, the slender thread that guides one back to safety and familiarity holds as much, if not greater, significance than the gleaming blade that secures conquest in a fierce engagement. And at times, the truest display of valor lies in the simple, yet profound act of remembering to hoist the triumphant white sails, signaling to those who cherish us that our return home has been accomplished without mishap. It is imperative to acknowledge that the pantheon of Greek heroes was not exclusively populated by male figures. Furthermore, not every arduous competition or challenging feat was ultimately claimed by those possessing the greatest brute strength or the most astonishing velocity. The subsequent account unfolds the remarkable saga of a woman fiercely committed to forging her own unique path and how, on occasion, astute ingenuity and sharp wit can decisively prevail over mere physical prowess and raw athletic talent. From the tenderest moments of her infancy, Atalanta faced a cruel abandonment by her father, a man whose fervent desire for a male heir had been met with profound disappointment at the arrival of a daughter. Cast out and left exposed on a desolate mountainside, destined for a lonely demise, she miraculously escaped this grim fate. Instead of succumbing, she was discovered and subsequently nurtured by a family of wild bears, an utterly unconventional upbringing that imbued her with extraordinary physical might, breathtaking swiftness, and an unparalleled mastery of wilderness survival techniques. As she matured, Atalanta assiduously cultivated her innate abilities, becoming an expert huntress with a bow and arrow, a peerless tracker of game through dense woodlands, and a runner whose speed surpassed every other individual in the surrounding territories. Her prowess was legendary. She could effortlessly outpace swift deer, scale treacherous mountain goats with ease, and overpower the majority of men she encountered in combat. She embodied ultimate self-reliance, utterly independent and requiring no guardian or protector. Upon reaching an age of maturity and robust capability, Atalanta embarked upon a momentous journey, joining the illustrious crew of the Argo. She sailed alongside the renowned Jason and his cadre of Argonauts, all united in their audacious quest for the mythical Golden Fleece. As the sole female among these legendary heroes, she swiftly demonstrated her exceptional talents, establishing herself as undeniably one of the most proficient and indispensable members of the entire expedition. Her skill with a bow was legendary. She could loose an arrow with unerring precision, ascend the ship's intricate rigging with the agility of a seasoned mariner, and engage in battle with the ferocity and expertise of a seasoned warrior. Following her triumphant return from the arduous and perilous quest for the Golden Fleece, Atalanta established herself within a modest kingdom, where her estranged father, now advanced in years, had at last formally recognized her as his rightful daughter. His advanced age and pressing need for an heir to perpetuate his lineage had prompted a significant shift in his perspective, leading him to conclude that possessing a celebrated and accomplished daughter was, without question, preferable to being entirely without progeny. However, a significant domestic dilemma soon emerged. Atalanta's father, ever mindful of dynastic continuity, earnestly desired for her to enter into matrimony and bear an heir to secure the future of their family lineage. Atalanta, conversely, harbored absolutely no inclination towards marriage. Having cultivated a life of unwavering autonomy and self-reliance from her earliest days, she possessed no desire to relinquish her cherished freedom and become subservient as another man's wife. Yet her father remained relentlessly insistent. He meticulously orchestrated introductions with numerous eligible young men, holding out hope that one of them might capture her fancy. But Atalanta consistently found these prospective suitors to be remarkably uninspiring and lacking in genuine substance. Their interest, she observed, was primarily superficial, centered on her renowned beauty and burgeoning fame, rather than a true comprehension or appreciation of her extraordinary abilities and fiercely independent spirit. Ultimately, To extricate herself from the incessant and suffocating paternal pressure to wed, Atalanta presented her father with an audacious proposal. She declared her willingness to consider marriage, but only on the most stringent and singular terms. Any man aspiring to claim her hand in matrimony would first be required to vanquish her in a grueling foot race. Should he emerge victorious, she would indeed consent to be his wife. However, if he were to suffer defeat, the consequence would be nothing less than immediate execution. This proposition, it must be stated, was far from reasonable, a fact Atalanta herself was acutely aware of. Her unparalleled speed meant she was swifter than any man she had ever encountered, and she harbored absolutely no intention of conceding victory in any race. Her strategic calculation was that the dire threat of execution would serve as a formidable deterrent, effectively discouraging any prospective suitors, and thereby ensuring her continued freedom to live precisely as she desired, unburdened by marital obligations. Regrettably, her carefully conceived scheme did not unfold as anticipated. The sheer audacity of the challenge, to compete against the celebrated Atalanta, proved an irresistible magnet, drawing ambitious men from every corner of Greece. Among them were genuinely swift runners who, perhaps misguidedly, believed they possessed a legitimate prospect of success. Others were merely consumed by hubris, utterly unable to countenance the notion that a woman could possibly surpass them in a foot race. And a final contingent found themselves so utterly captivated by Atalanta's breathtaking beauty that they were prepared to stake their very lives for the merest possibility of winning her hand in marriage. In a grim procession, these eager suitors stepped forward, one after another, to challenge Atalanta to the appointed races, and, with equally relentless regularity, she systematically vanquished each one. She derived no discernible satisfaction from these successive triumphs. Her purpose in running was to preserve her cherished liberty, not to engage in mere athletic diversion. Nevertheless, she was inextricably bound by the solemn promise she had made, and consequently, every defeated suitor met his grim fate, executed precisely as stipulated by the unforgiving conditions of the challenge. After the passage of several disquieting months, Atalanta found herself increasingly troubled and distressed by the ever-growing tally of men who had perished in their ill-fated attempts to win her hand. Her original intent had been merely to deter unwanted suitors, not to amass a gruesome pile of lifeless bodies. She contemplated altering the severe rules of the contest, yet a profound apprehension held her back, fearing that any perceived indication of leniency or weakness on her part would only serve to embolden an even greater surge of men to test their fortune against her. Then, a youthful contender named Hippomenes, known also as Melanion in certain ancient accounts, made his entrance, presenting himself as the next challenger. He possessed a pleasing handsomeness and an athletic physique, though he did not immediately strike Atalanta as the swiftest runner she had ever witnessed. More significantly, he appeared markedly distinct from the cohort of previous suitors. His demeanor was more contemplative, genuinely respectful, and notably devoid of the customary arrogance. Atalanta, to her own surprise, found herself harboring a rare hope that this particular individual would possess the sagacity to prudently withdraw his challenge. She even engaged him in a private conversation, issuing a solemn warning about the grim destiny that had befallen earlier contenders, and gently suggesting that he might wish to seriously reevaluate his perilous decision. I have borne witness to the demise of numerous men who endeavored to outstrip my speed, she candidly confided to him, her voice tinged with a genuine concern. It is not my desire to see you, too, meet such a tragic end. I implore you, seek another companion for life. Indeed, countless women would undoubtedly find immense joy in uniting with a man of your evident qualities. Nonetheless, Hippomenes remained unyieldingly resolute in his intention to proceed with the arduous race. For weeks preceding this moment, he had assiduously observed Atalanta, and in that time, he had become deeply enamored, not merely by her striking physical allure, but by the profound embodiment of her fierce independence and formidable strength. His aspiration was to marry her, certainly, but crucially, he also harbored a deep and genuine respect for her inherent right to autonomously select her own life partner. Unbeknownst to Atalanta, Hippomenes had been undertaking a most unconventional form of preparation for the impending contest. He had fervently offered prayers to Aphrodite, the revered goddess of love, imploring her divine assistance in securing Atalanta's hand. Aphrodite, who had been observing the unfolding predicament with considerable interest, ultimately resolved to intercede. The benevolent deity bestowed upon Hippomenes 3 exquisite golden apples, plucked from the mystical garden of the Hesperides. These fruits were not merely objects of stunning aesthetic beauty. They possessed an inherent, irresistible allure that captivated anyone who laid eyes upon them. Aphrodite meticulously instructed him to strategically deploy these apples by dropping them during the course of the race, assuring him that their enchanting properties would momentarily divert Atalanta's attention, providing him with a critical window to claim victory. On the fated day of the race, a vast concourse of spectators converged, eager to witness the spectacle. A considerable portion of the throng harbored a quiet hope of seeing Atalanta finally vanquished, not out of any personal animosity towards her, but rather due to their weariness of the tragic procession of young men perishing in these seemingly futile contests. Other attendees were simply consumed by an authentic curiosity, anxious to ascertain if any challenger could genuinely rival her legendary swiftness. Atalanta and Hippomenes took their respective positions at the starting line. She cast a final lingering glance in his direction, a silent plea in her eyes, still hoping he might yet recant his perilous decision. However, his posture and expression conveyed an unwavering commitment to the impending contest. With a resigned sigh, she braced herself, preparing to unleash her full, formidable speed. Her conviction was absolute. She would emerge victorious in this race, just as she had in all the preceding ones, and another young man would tragically forfeit his life, a victim of his own hubris and misguided audacity. With the signal given, the race commenced, and Atalanta, true to her reputation, instantly surged into the lead. She maintained a formidable pace, running at approximately 3/4 of her absolute maximum speed, a velocity ample enough to comfortably stay ahead of her challenger, yet calibrated precisely to avoid prematurely exhausting her stamina. Her calculated strategy involved sustaining this measured tempo for the majority of the course, reserving her ultimate burst of speed for a decisive sprint at the finish, thereby unequivocally guaranteeing her victory. However, as the competitors neared the initial turn of the track, Hippomenes deftly produced one of his enchanted golden apples and artfully rolled it off the running path. The fruit shimmered with an ethereal luster in the bright sunlight, its exquisite beauty so utterly mesmerizing that Atalanta found herself irresistibly drawn to gaze upon it. She experienced an involuntary deceleration, almost coming to a complete halt as her eyes fixated on the flawless, radiant golden orb. After a fleeting few seconds, she snapped back to awareness and recommenced her relentless stride. But Hippomenes had shrewdly exploited this momentary diversion, effectively narrowing the distance between them. He was now running directly behind her, effortlessly matching her formidable pace and exuding a palpable air of self-assurance. Atalanta felt a flicker of perplexity, yet it was not accompanied by any true concern. Her distraction had been but a fleeting instant, and she was confident in her ability to effortlessly reclaim her advantage. She consequently accelerated her pace marginally, once more drawing ahead of Hippomenes. Yet, as they rounded the subsequent bend, Hippomenes deployed his second golden apple, rolling it deliberately into her path. This particular fruit surpassed the first in its dazzling allure, appearing to emanate a subtle, captivating inner luminescence. Once more, Atalanta found her formidable momentum faltering as she became utterly spellbound by the apple's transcendent beauty. Such an object, she realized, was entirely beyond her prior experience. On this occasion, to Atalanta's astonishment, Hippomenes actually seized the lead. He was demonstrating a remarkable turn of speed, far exceeding what Atalanta had initially anticipated, and he was shrewdly leveraging his meticulous familiarity with the racing course to his distinct advantage. He had evidently scrutinized the route with painstaking care, possessing an exact understanding of the optimal points at which to deploy his distracting golden treasures for their most potent impact. A dawning awareness now settled upon Atalanta. Something profoundly out of the ordinary was undeniably transpiring. These were clearly not mere mundane fruits. They possessed an inherent mystical potency that rendered them utterly irresistible to the gaze. She exerted a tremendous effort to compel her mind to concentrate solely on the critical task of the race. Yet her eyes continued to betray her, repeatedly darting back towards the gleaming golden apples strewn strategically along the winding path. As the finish line loomed a mere short distance away, Atalanta mustered an extraordinary burst of energy, determined to reclaim the leading position. Her pace surged to an unprecedented velocity, a breathtaking display of raw power and unyielding determination poured into a decisive final sprint. She began to visibly close the gap on Hippomenes, and for a fleeting moment, it appeared she might indeed overtake him. Yet at that precise juncture, Hippomenes unleashed his third and conclusive golden apple. This resplendent orb settled with pinpoint accuracy directly in Atalanta's path, its allure far surpassing the combined magnificence of its predecessors. It appeared to encapsulate the entirety of the world's precious gold, meticulously compressed and refined into one singular, flawless piece of fruit. The irresistible charm of the golden apple proved too potent for Atalanta to ignore. She halted her furious pace, stooping to retrieve the exquisite fruit, her gaze fixed in profound admiration upon its unparalleled beauty and meticulous artistry. It radiated a subtle warmth against her fingertips and conveyed an almost palpable sensation of vibrant vitality. Never in her extensive experience had she encountered an object crafted with such absolute perfection. In the moments Atalanta dedicated to scrutinizing the captivating apple, Hippomenes seized his opportunity, surging across the finish line. The assembled multitude erupted into a cacophony of jubilant cheers and thunderous applause. Remarkably, for the first time in many months, a competitive race had concluded without the grim consequence of any participant facing execution. Hippomenes had emerged victorious, securing his triumph not through sheer physical velocity, but through an astute display of strategic ingenuity. Remaining stationary at the finish line, still clutching the radiant golden apple, Atalanta endeavored to fully comprehend the bewildering turn of events that had just transpired. She recognized her defeat, yet it manifested in a manner entirely divergent from her preconceptions. Her loss was not attributable to a superior runner surpassing her speed. Rather, she had been cleverly outmaneuvered. A segment of her spirit simmered with indignation at having been so artfully deceived, while simultaneously another part harbored a profound admiration for Hippomenes' ingenious tactical approach. He had masterfully devised a method to secure victory in the contest, without in any way demeaning her formidable athletic prowess or reducing her to a mere trophy to be claimed. He had unequivocally recognized her exceptional swiftness and profound skill, employing his own intellectual acumen to ingeniously equalize the competitive arena. As her acquaintance with Hippomenes deepened and evolved, Atalanta came to the profound realization that he stood in stark contrast to the multitude of other aspiring suitors. He harbored no desire to fundamentally alter her identity or mold her into the conventional archetype of a domestic wife. Instead, he genuinely revered her fierce independence and celebrated her extraordinary aptitudes, expressing a clear aspiration to function as her equal partner rather than her dominant master. Their union was subsequently solemnized in a ceremony that served as a vibrant testament to the individual and collective accomplishments of both individuals. Atalanta steadfastly retained her beloved bow and arrows, persisting in her passion for hunting and her vigorous participation in athletic competitions. Hippomenes, in turn, consistently championed her chosen endeavors and frequently joined her on her various adventurous expeditions. The enduring narrative of Atalanta's legendary race serves as a compelling reminder that, on occasion, the most profoundly significant triumphs do not emanate from possessing supreme physical strength or unparalleled swiftness, but rather from the judicious application of intellect, profound respect, and empathetic comprehension. Hippomenes undeniably secured victory in the athletic contest, yet he simultaneously earned Atalanta's profound esteem by engaging in genuine competition with her, rather than attempting to undermine or belittle her formidable capabilities. Furthermore, this tale subtly intimates that an authentic and robust partnership necessitates discovering innovative approaches to acknowledge and celebrate each other's inherent strengths, even while collaboratively striving towards shared objectives. Atalanta and Hippomenes forged a marital bond that graciously permitted both individuals to express their authentic selves, all the while constructing a meaningful life together. As your consciousness gently transitions towards the tranquil embrace of sleep, you might find it insightful to ponder the various metaphorical races you are currently navigating within your own existence. Are your efforts primarily directed towards vying against others in a spirit of intense rivalry? Or are you actively seeking out collaborative partners who can genuinely assist you in realizing your aspirations? It is often the case that the most fulfilling victories are those in which every participant gains something inherently precious and enduring. The spoken word possesses an undeniable potency, capable of serving as both extraordinarily powerful instruments and paradoxically, as inescapable confines. This particular narrative recounts the plight of a spirited young woman whose profound affection for discourse and her inherent talent for eloquent conversation ultimately transmuted into a dire curse, irrevocably altering the very fabric of her communicative abilities for all time. Echo was known throughout the ancient world as a mountain nymph, belonging to the ethereal company of nature spirits who gracefully inhabited the verdant forests and sun-drenched meadows of ancient Greece. While she possessed the inherent beauty characteristic of her nymph kin, her most truly exceptional attribute was undoubtedly her voice. She commanded an extraordinary gift for articulate expression, capable of weaving intricate narratives that could captivate and enthrall listeners, holding them utterly spellbound for extended periods. Above all else, Echo harbored an unparalleled passion for the art of conversation, cherishing it beyond any other earthly delight. She would readily engage in dialogue with any entity willing to lend an ear, fellow nymphs, transient wayfarers traversing the mountainous terrain, the various creatures of the wild, and even the seemingly inanimate trees and geological formations. She possessed firmly held convictions on every conceivable topic, articulating them with an engaging blend of sharp wit and captivating charm. Her vocal prowess was such that she could effortlessly induce laughter, provoke tears of emotion, or compel individuals to profoundly contemplate subjects they had previously overlooked or never before entertained. However, amidst her many enchanting qualities, Echo possessed one rather considerable imperfection. Her primary failing was an uncontrollable propensity for excessive verbalization. While she invariably initiated discussions with the most commendable intentions, she would frequently become so utterly engrossed in the sheer exhilaration of articulating her thoughts that she would entirely neglect the crucial act of listening. Her conversational habits included interjecting into others' speeches, abruptly redirecting the topic to areas that held greater personal fascination for her, and persistently speaking long after her listeners had demonstrably wearied of her monologue. What might otherwise have remained a relatively innocuous personal eccentricity, Echo's profound affinity for loquaciousness ultimately ensnared her in grave difficulties with the formidable Olympian deities. She inadvertently became an accessory in an intricate stratagem designed to aid Zeus, the supreme monarch of the gods, in concealing his numerous illicit romantic liaisons from the vigilant gaze of his divine consort, Hera. Zeus, as was widely acknowledged, possessed an infamous reputation for his incessant romantic escapades with both mortal women and fellow nymphs. Conversely, Hera was equally renowned for her fierce, unyielding jealousy and her penchant for exacting severe retribution. Whenever the faintest suspicion of Zeus's infidelity stirred within Hera's mind, she would relentlessly endeavor to apprehend him in flagrante delicto, frequently materializing abruptly in locations where she surmised he might be engaged in an amorous rendezvous. Within the unfolding of this celestial drama, Echo's assigned responsibility was dual-faceted, to act both as a vigilant sentinel and as an artful diversion. Whenever Zeus was occupied in the company of other women, Echo would adeptly ensnare Hera in protracted, meandering conversations, thereby ensuring the goddess remained thoroughly preoccupied and effectively thwarted from unearthing her husband's clandestine activities. Echo proved preeminently suited for this particular task, given her innate capacity to speak interminably on any conceivable subject, coupled with her captivating charm, which was sufficient to sustain Hera's attention. For a considerable period, this intricate arrangement functioned with remarkable efficacy. Zeus successfully perpetuated his numerous illicit liaisons, consistently evading detection, while Echo, in turn, experienced a gratifying sense of utility and genuine appreciation. She relished the opportunity to engage in such purportedly significant dialogues with the revered queen of the gods, taking immense pride in her singular aptitude for retaining Hera's typically fleeting attention. Nevertheless, Hera, renowned for her sharp intellect, was by no means naive. Her inherent disposition inclined her towards suspicion, and she gradually began to discern a peculiar pattern. Echo invariably seemed to materialize precisely when Zeus was inexplicably absent. The stark realization dawned upon her that the nymph was intentionally diverting her focus, actively obstructing her efforts to uncover her husband's surreptitious activities. Upon Hera's ultimate comprehension of the unfolding deception, her indignation surged into a tempest of unbridled fury. She perceived Echo's actions as a profound betrayal, for the nymph had feigned companionship while clandestinely assisting Zeus in his elaborate ruses. Consequently, Hera resolved to inflict a punitive measure upon the nymph, one meticulously tailored to perfectly correspond with the nature of her transgression. "Your greatest joy lies in speaking," Hera declared to Echo, her voice laced with divine wrath. "You revel in the satisfaction of uttering the conclusive statement in every exchange. Henceforth, your vocal capacity shall be restricted solely to reiterating the final utterances directed towards you by others. Never again shall you possess the power to initiate a dialogue or articulate your independent reflections." With an agonizing swiftness, the divine malediction manifested its full, immediate potency. Echo instinctively attempted to formulate a response, to either mount a defense or tender an earnest apology. Yet she discovered with chilling clarity that her voice could merely reverberate Hera's very words back to the goddess. She endeavored to utter the penitent phrase, "I am sorry," but the only sounds that escaped her lips were the echoing syllables, "To you." She then desperately tried to plead, "Please forgive me," only to find herself capable of repeating, "To you again." Having delivered her formidable decree, Hera departed, her divine resolve sated by the swift execution of her vengeance, leaving Echo in desolate solitude to contend with the profound ramifications of her irreversible chastisement. The nymph agonizingly realized that while she retained the faculty of speech, it was now tragically constrained. She could only vocalize in direct reaction to others, and solely by mimicking their exact words. The ability to initiate a dialogue, to weave intricate narratives, or to articulate her intrinsic thoughts and profound emotions had been irrevocably stripped away. For a being whose very essence had been defined by and thrived upon the vibrant exchange of conversation, this affliction represented an utterly devastating and soul-crushing penalty. In the wake of her profound loss, Echo withdrew into the secluded depths of a mountain cave, dedicating her days to an existence of utter solitude, uttering not a single word to any living soul. She progressively succumbed to a profound state of melancholy and became entirely reclusive, grieving ceaselessly over the irretrievable forfeiture of her once cherished capacity for meaningful communication. Yet the unfolding saga of Echo was far from concluded with the imposition of her severe punishment. At a subsequent point in time, she chanced upon a youthful hunter named Narcissus, who was pursuing game amidst the rugged mountain terrain. Narcissus possessed an astonishing, almost ethereal handsomeness. But beneath this captivating exterior lay a character marred by profound vanity and an inherent cruelty. He had, without exception, spurned every individual, irrespective of gender, who had ever dared to fall in love with him, frequently subjecting them to scorn and derision for their heartfelt emotions. Upon beholding Narcissus, Echo was instantly captivated, her heart irrevocably surrendering to an overwhelming surge of love. She trailed him stealthily through the dense forest, her spirit yearning for a solitary opportunity to engage him in discourse. Yet she remained tragically ensnared by the inexorable bonds of her curse. Her affliction rendered her utterly incapable of either initiating an approach or commencing a conversation. All she could do was patiently, agonizingly, await his initial utterance. Eventually, Narcissus grew acutely conscious of a persistent, unseen presence shadowing his movements. He then projected his voice, demanding, "Who lurks there? Reveal yourself." Echo, concealed from view behind the sturdy trunk of a tree, found herself able only to echo his exact words. "Show yourself." She responded, her voice a spectral imitation. Narcissus meticulously scanned his surroundings, yet his eyes failed to discern any visible individual. He reiterated his command, calling out once more, "Approach me! Approach me!" Echo echoed, her form emerging from the concealment of the tree. Upon finally perceiving her, Narcissus experienced an initial flicker of curiosity. She possessed an undeniable allure, and her peculiar inability to engage in conventional speech held a certain enigmatic appeal. However, the moment he fully grasped that she was confined to merely reiterating his own utterances, his interest rapidly waned. "I have no desire to converse with an individual whose sole linguistic capacity is to parrot my expressions," he stated with a tone of utter dismissal. "Seek out another to trouble with your presence." "Seek out another to trouble," Echo repeated, her voice fracturing under the immense weight of her profound emotion. Without a backward glance, Narcissus strode away, abandoning Echo to her solitude amidst the vast, indifferent forest. Her heart was utterly shattered, not merely by the sting of his outright rejection, but far more acutely by the cruel reality that her curse had rendered her utterly incapable of articulating her genuine affections. She found herself powerless to convey the depth of her admiration, to implore him for a mere opportunity, or even to mount a defense against his cutting words. Echo withdrew yet deeper into the remote fastnesses of the mountains, where she gradually succumbed to a profound wasting away, consumed by an unbearable sorrow and a pervasive sense of isolation. She ceased consuming nourishment, abandoned all self-care, and dedicated her interminable days to uttering plaintive calls into the vacant atmosphere, perpetually hoping that some soul would speak to her, thereby enabling her to reciprocate. In time, her physical form utterly dematerialized, leaving behind nothing but her ethereal voice. She thus transformed into an exclusively acoustic manifestation, a disembodied sound capable solely of reiterating the utterances of others. Her new abode became the echoing caverns and dramatic canyons, where the natural rock formations served to amplify her voice, affording her the perennial opportunity to respond to any who chose to speak. Simultaneously, Narcissus persisted in his callous disregard for the affections of those who adored him. However, the celestial powers observed his haughty demeanor, determining that a significant corrective experience was imperative for his character. They meticulously orchestrated a scenario where he would encounter his own image, mirrored perfectly in a tranquil basin of water, thereby instigating an inescapable infatuation. Narcissus subsequently became utterly consumed by this captivating self-image. Powerless to depart from the water's edge or to caress the exquisite visage he perceived, he gradually diminished, mirroring the tragic fate of Echo, succumbing to an unfulfilled yearning for an object forever beyond his grasp. Ultimately, he underwent a metamorphosis, becoming the delicate bloom that perpetually carries his appellation. Echo's ethereal vocal presence endured amidst the craggy mountain ranges, faithfully reiterating the utterances of passing wayfarers and intrepid huntsmen. For certain individuals, her perpetual presence offered a peculiar solace, akin to possessing a steadfast confidant who would unfailingly echo their pronouncements. Conversely, others found themselves unsettled by the incorporeal sound, which appeared to deride them through its ceaseless reiteration of their every word. Yet, Echo herself harbored no intent of derision. She had, with poignant belatedness, grasped the profound importance of attentive listening, a faculty as vital as articulate speaking. Although she had forfeited the capacity to articulate her personal reflections, she had acquired an alternative, profound mode of interaction, the unique faculty to reverberate the expressions of others, thereby serving as an auditory looking-glass for their pronouncements and emotional states. Remarkably, Echo's seemingly dire affliction transmuted, in certain respects, into an enigmatic boon. Her singular ability enabled her to assist individuals in achieving heightened self-awareness by reverberating their own utterances for their consideration. Furthermore, she could impart a measure of solace to solitary wanderers, guaranteeing that they would consistently encounter a response to their vocalizations, no matter how isolated their journey. She evolved into an eternal auditor, an ever-present entity prepared to validate and recognize the spoken contributions of others. The enduring narrative of Echo serves as a potent reminder that effective communication transcends mere articulation. It fundamentally encompasses active listening, profound comprehension, and the establishment of genuine rapport with fellow beings. Echo's initial failing was not an excessive fondness for loquacity, but rather a profound deficiency in the art of attentive listening. Her imposed penalty, therefore, served to impart the invaluable equilibrium inherent in both facets of a dialogue. Moreover, this tale underscores the inherent potency of language, emphasizing that such power inevitably carries a significant burden of responsibility. Echo, regrettably, employed her conversational prowess to facilitate Zeus's elaborate deception of Hera. The repercussions of that cunning act extended beyond the Olympian deities, profoundly impacting Echo herself. Occasionally, the pronouncements we utter and the manner in which we deploy our voices can precipitate extensive ramifications, often entirely unforeseen. As one retreats into the tranquil stillness of the approaching night, it might be beneficial to ponder the various exchanges that transpired throughout the day. Did one grant as much attention to listening as to speaking? Were one's utterances employed for benevolent assistance or for detrimental injury? The dawn of a new day will invariably present fresh occasions for interaction, for articulating one's perspectives, and for absorbing the contributions of others. Should one ever discover themselves in an environment where their vocalizations seem to reverberate back, let them recall the poignant narrative of Echo. She persists within the majestic mountains and profound canyons, ever prepared to reiterate one's expressions and to serve as a gentle reminder that true solitude is elusive as long as one possesses the capacity for vocal communication. Our exploration through these venerable narratives concludes with an account previously referenced, yet now re-examined through a distinct lens, specifically from the paternal perspective. This particular saga unfolds as a poignant exploration of profound affection, relentless aspiration, and the formidable cost frequently exacted by pioneering ingenuity. It starkly illustrates how the very same inventive spirit, capable of liberating us from constraints, can simultaneously precipitate our most profound and irrecoverable misfortunes. Daedalus transcended the mere definition of an adroit artisan. He embodied the multifaceted roles of an ingenious inventor, a meticulous engineer, and an inspired artist, all seamlessly integrated into a singular being. His cognitive faculties allowed him to discern answers to complex challenges that eluded the very imagination of his contemporaries. His intellect operated on a plane distinct from the average individual, perpetually contemplating methods for enhancement, tirelessly conceptualizing how the seemingly unattainable could be rendered tangible and achievable. However, the profound weight of genius frequently manifests as an isolating burden. Daedalus possessed a meager circle of acquaintances, a consequence stemming partly from his complete immersion in his creative endeavors, and partly from the disquiet his exceptional intellect engendered in others. He would often become so utterly engrossed in a particular undertaking that he would neglect fundamental needs such as sustenance and rest, along with customary social interactions. His existence was primarily confined to an intricate realm populated by architectural schematics, preliminary models, precise dimensions, and complex arithmetical computations. The sole individual who genuinely comprehended the intricate workings of Daedalus's mind was his beloved son, Icarus. The youthful heir had inherited a vibrant spark of his father's inquisitive nature and inventive spirit, though he lacked the elder's characteristic, unwavering concentration. While Daedalus approached tasks with a meticulous and cautious disposition, Icarus exhibited an impetuous and enthusiastic temperament. Where the father painstakingly charted every minute particular, the son yearned to bypass the preliminary stages and plunge directly into the thrilling aspects of any project. Notwithstanding these inherent divergences in their personalities, the paternal and filial bond between them remained remarkably strong. Daedalus diligently imparted to Icarus the entirety of his extensive knowledge concerning construction and artistic creation. In turn, Icarus actively assisted his father in various undertakings, acquiring proficiency in the handling of implements and cultivating his own nascent theories regarding mechanical principles. They dedicated countless hours within the confines of their workshop, engaging in a symbiotic exchange of concepts and collaborative problem-solving. Upon their incarceration within the intricate confines of the labyrinth, Icarus grappled with the oppressive restriction of movement far more intensely than his elder father. Being in the prime of his youth and brimming with vitality, the sensation of being ensnared within the convoluted maze felt tantamount to a protracted demise for him. He would incessantly traverse the winding passageways with an agitated restlessness, keenly scrutinizing the structural integrity for any vulnerabilities, assessing the elevation of the enclosing ramparts, and tirelessly seeking any conceivable avenue for liberation. Daedalus observed his son's burgeoning anguish with a profound sense of culpability. He recognized that it was his own overweening pride and unbridled ambition that had ensnared them in their current predicament. He had, in his masterful execution, constructed the labyrinth with such flawless ingenuity, rendering King Minos excessively reliant upon his unique talents, thereby inadvertently orchestrating their mutual incarceration. Consequently, he bore the heavy onus of his offspring's torment. The revolutionary concept of fabricating wings for human flight dawned upon Daedalus incrementally. He had harbored a lifelong enchantment with the phenomenon of aerial locomotion, particularly captivated by the avian capacity to navigate through three-dimensional space, enjoying an unbridled liberty to traverse any desired trajectory. He had meticulously analyzed the physiological structure of birds, closely examining the architectural design of their wings and their dynamic interplay with atmospheric currents. Nevertheless, he had never genuinely entertained the notion of constructing such appendages for human application. The inherent engineering hurdles were monumental, and the attendant perils conspicuously apparent. Even supposing he could devise wings robust enough to bear a human physique, how would he ascertain their efficacy without imperiling a life? How could he guarantee their flawless operation when the very survival of an individual rested upon their performance? The inescapable reality of their confinement within the labyrinth irrevocably altered his viewpoint. Confronted with the stark dichotomy between an assured, protracted incarceration and the perilous prospect of demise, the inherent dangers associated with flight began to appear increasingly tolerable. He commenced the arduous task of gathering disparate components and meticulously drafting preliminary schematics, diligently unraveling the intricate mathematical principles governing aerodynamic lift and drag, and precisely computing the requisite wing surface area essential for sustaining human mass. Icarus, for his part, found himself utterly captivated by the audacious undertaking. He eagerly lent his assistance in accumulating various feathers and procuring quantities of wax, simultaneously posing an incessant barrage of inquiries regarding the operational mechanics of the proposed wings. His enthusiasm for the imminent possibility of soaring through the skies far eclipsed any apprehension he might have harbored concerning the inherent perils of such an endeavor. What sensation will it evoke? He eagerly queried his paternal figure. Will the experience be akin to navigating through the aerial expanse? Will we possess the capability to execute intricate aerial maneuvers, such as loops and plummeting dives, mirroring the agility of feathered creatures? Daedalus endeavored to underscore the gravity and solemnity of their meticulously devised escape strategy. This is unequivocally not a recreational pursuit, Icarus. We shall be placing our very existences in jeopardy. It is imperative that we proceed with utmost circumspection and prudence. There are to be no flamboyant aerial acrobatics, no dramatic descents, no ostentatious displays. Our trajectory must be direct and unwavering until we attain a secure refuge. Yet Icarus offered a perfunctory nod, his attention only superficially engaged. He was excessively enthralled by the poetic allure of flight to genuinely concentrate on the pragmatic intricacies. In his vivid imagination, he already perceived himself ascending effortlessly through the celestial expanse, unburdened, potent, and elegantly poised. Upon the ultimate culmination of the wings' construction, Daedalus subjected them to a rigorous series of trials. He initiated his assessments with brief, controlled glides, progressively escalating to more extended periods of aerial locomotion. To his immense relief, the meticulously crafted contraptions surpassed his most optimistic expectations. They evinced remarkable structural integrity, demonstrated acute responsiveness, and proved entirely capable of sustaining his bodily mass. As this audacious scheme dawned upon him as a genuine possibility, he experienced a complex meld of profound gratification and chilling apprehension. On the pivotal day designated for their daring evasion, Daedalus drew his son aside for a conclusive, earnest discussion. His primary objective was to ascertain that Icarus fully grasped the inherent perils they were about to confront and the absolute necessity of adhering precisely to his directives. "Recollect my admonitions regarding vertical elevation," he uttered with gravitas. "Neither ascend excessively high, nor descend unduly low. The intense solar radiation will liquefy the adhesive wax if you venture too close to the heavens. Conversely, the pervasive oceanic mist will saturate and burden the feathers if your trajectory is too near the water's surface. Maintain a moderate altitude and diligently emulate my flight path." Icarus affirmed his comprehension with a grave inclination of his head, proclaiming, "I apprehend your caution, father. I shall exercise utmost prudence." Subsequently, they meticulously fastened their winged apparatuses and proceeded to the labyrinth's zenith. Daedalus assumed the vanguard, launching himself from the precipice and experiencing the immediate embrace of the atmospheric currents by his fabricated wings. For a fleeting instant, a chilling premonition of plummeting assailed him, but then, miraculously, he was airborne, truly soaring, sustained by naught but the delicate plumes, the binding wax, and his profound mastery of aerodynamic principles. Icarus swiftly emulated his father's audacious leap, and a jubilant exclamation reverberated throughout the colossal maze as he encountered the marvel of flight for the very first occasion. The sheer exhilaration of the sensation transcended even the most vivid fantasies he had previously entertained. He perceived himself as utterly devoid of mass, imbued with formidable strength, and completely emancipated from the pervasive limitations of terrestrial existence. Together they traversed the skies above the island of Crete, with Daedalus maintaining the lead and Icarus dutifully trailing behind. The meticulously planned evasion was unfolding with consummate precision. They were, at long last, unfettered. They were secure, and they were partaking in an experience utterly unprecedented for humanity. During the initial 60 minutes of their aerial journey, Icarus adhered flawlessly to his father's explicit directives. He conscientiously maintained the prescribed elevation, sustained a consistent rate of progression, and valiantly suppressed the urge to test the full potential of his winged apparatus. However, as his self-assurance burgeoned, so too did his innate inquisitiveness. The panoramic vista from their elevated vantage point was nothing short of breathtaking. The myriad islands appeared like precious gemstones strewn across the vast expanse of the azure ocean, while the celestial clouds sculpted formations entirely imperceptible from the terrestrial plane. Icarus commenced to grasp the profound reason for the apparent exuberance of birds in flight. This, he concluded, was unequivocally the most magnificent perspective imaginable within the entire world. Gradually, the young man began to ascend, pushing his flight path ever higher. He rationalized this ascent to himself, asserting that his sole motivation was to attain a more expansive vista, to thoroughly investigate the absolute limits of the magnificent wings his father had crafted. There was no conscious intention to defy Daedalus. Rather, a profound curiosity stirred within him, an irresistible urge to discover the sensation of soaring amidst the ethereal expanse of the clouds. Daedalus, engrossed in the intricate demands of navigation and vigilantly scanning the horizon for any potential perils, was initially oblivious to his son's increasingly ambitious climb. When his gaze at last swept back and located Icarus far above his own more prudent altitude, a cry of profound alarm escaped his lips. "Icarus, descend! Your elevation is perilous." Yet Icarus remained utterly captivated, indeed intoxicated, by the sheer exhilaration of his aerial journey. With each further increment of height he achieved, the panorama unfolding beneath him grew progressively more breathtaking and sublime. He could discern landscapes and horizons far beyond the reach of any mortal gaze, experiencing a sensation of proximity to the divine rather than to the terrestrial realm below. He offered a dismissive wave to his father, a gesture intended to convey reassurance, signaling that all was well and that he was entirely in command of his audacious flight. However, he was gravely mistaken. True control was already slipping from his grasp. The relentless intensity of the sun's fiery embrace had already commenced its insidious assault upon the wax that meticulously bound the feathers of his ingenious wings. Tiny, molten droplets of wax began to detach and fall away, and the meticulously arranged plumage started to loosen and drift. But Icarus, utterly consumed by the profound, unadulterated joy of this unprecedented flight, remained oblivious to these critical signs of impending catastrophe until the moment of no return had tragically arrived. As the meticulously constructed wings finally succumbed to the heat and began their irreversible disintegration, Icarus was granted a fleeting, agonizing instant of terrible, crystal-clear understanding. A chilling realization washed over him. He had committed a fatal error, his boundless curiosity and unbridled excitement having led him to willfully disregard the solemn warnings issued by his father. He attempted to cry out to Daedalus, a desperate plea, but the turbulent wind snatched his voice away, rendering his final utterance unheard. Daedalus, transfixed in a tableau of unadulterated horror, watched helplessly as his son's wings catastrophically failed, sending Icarus plummeting with terrifying velocity towards the unforgiving sea. He instinctively attempted to dive to his aid, but the vast distance separating them and Icarus's rapid descent rendered any intervention impossible. He could only bear witness to the unspeakable tragedy as his beloved son vanished beneath the churning waves. The remainder of Daedalus's solitary flight transformed into a living nightmare, burdened by an unbearable weight of profound grief and gnawing guilt. He had indeed accomplished his monumental objective of escaping the labyrinthine prison, but the devastating cost of that freedom was far greater than his spirit could possibly endure. He had bestowed upon his son the miraculous gift of flight, and that very gift, in a cruel twist of fate, had become the instrument of his demise. When Daedalus eventually reached a haven of safety, his search led him to Icarus's lifeless form, which had been carried by the currents and washed ashore on a desolate, small island. He tenderly interred his son there, choosing a poignant location from which one could behold both the vast expanse of the sea and the boundless sky. In a solemn act of remembrance, he christened the island Icaria, forever dedicating it to the memory of the adventurous boy who had dared to fly too intimately with the sun. Daedalus continued his existence for many more years, yet he never again fashioned another pair of wings. He persevered in his vocations as an accomplished inventor and a skilled architect, but a palpable shift had occurred within him. He was now imbued with a profound caution, acutely aware of the potentially dire consequences inherent in all his creations. He had absorbed a harrowing lesson that innovation, unchecked by the guiding hand of wisdom, possessed the capacity to be lethally destructive, and that the ingenious artifacts we bring into being could, inadvertently, inflict the deepest wounds upon those we cherish most dearly. He frequently found himself pondering whether his audacious decision to attempt an escape from the labyrinth had been the correct one. While they had been held captive, they had at least enjoyed a measure of safety and security. His choice to construct the wings had certainly offered them a chance at liberation, but it had simultaneously presented Icarus with the perilous opportunity to commit a fatal error. The enduring narrative of Daedalus and Icarus is frequently recounted as a cautionary tale, elucidating the inherent dangers associated with unrestrained ambition and excessive pride. However, it also functions as a poignant exploration of the intricate and often challenging relationship between parents and their offspring, highlighting the delicate equilibrium that must be maintained between safeguarding our loved ones and affording them the necessary space to undertake risks. Daedalus possessed the capability to design wings that were inherently incapable of ascending to dangerous altitudes. He could have engineered a contraption that would compel Icarus to remain at a safe, predetermined elevation, but to do so would have tragically deprived his son of the very essence of freedom that rendered flight truly meaningful and worthwhile. Instead, he opted to place his trust in Icarus's ability to adhere to instructions, a trust that was ultimately betrayed by the irrepressible natural curiosity and effervescent enthusiasm characteristic of youth. Ultimately, perhaps the most profoundly tragic dimension of this ancient story is not merely the fact of Icarus's demise, but rather that his death occurred in the very act of pursuing something exquisitely beautiful. For a precious few moments, he experienced a transcendent, almost spiritual joy, a profound connection with the boundless sky, the radiant sun, and the infinite, exhilarating possibilities that flight unveiled. His end was undeniably terrible, yet his brief existence in those final, soaring moments was nothing short of magnificent. As we draw to a close our intellectual journey through these venerable narratives, we are prompted to reflect upon the foundational themes that intricately link them all. The profound experiences of love and loss, the double-edged nature of ambition and its inevitable consequences, the often steep price of acquiring knowledge, and the enduring, invaluable worth of wisdom. These are universal human experiences that effortlessly transcend the boundaries of time and culture, remaining as profoundly relevant in our contemporary world as they were many millennia ago. The ancient Greeks meticulously crafted and disseminated these stories not merely for the purpose of entertainment, but primarily to guide individuals in comprehending the inherent complexities of human nature and the difficult, often agonizing choices that we are all compelled to confront. They serve as potent reminders that heroism frequently exacts a considerable price, that the profound emotion of love can lead to both unparalleled joy and inconsolable sorrow, and that the tangible creations we bring into existence possess the remarkable capacity to outlive us in ways we could never have possibly anticipated. Tonight, as you prepare to embrace the tranquility of sleep, may you carry within you the resonant voices of these ancient storytellers, the profound wisdom distilled from these timeless tales, and the humbling understanding that our individual narratives are but threads woven into a much grander human tapestry, stretching back to the very genesis of civilization itself. Sweet dreams, and may your own metaphorical wings carry you safely home.